Chapter 202. The crowd parted, and Di Yen rushed in. Seeing Ning Kaisian exhaling more than inhaling, he rushed to her, hugged her, and said anxiously, Cousin Xian, are you all right? Ning Kaisian panted heavily, as if she couldn't catch her breath. Seeing that the situation was not good, the people around also hurried to make way for her to have more space to breathe. Cousin. Seeing Di Yen come in and hug Ning Kaisian without asking her, Qin Yuru was so angry that her face turned pale. Shut up. Looking at the delicate Ning Kaisian in his arms, Di Yen said angrily. Cousin, you actually scolded me for this bitch? Seeing the sarcasm on the faces of the people around, Qin Yuru was so angry that her face turned pale. Her lips trembled a few times, and her eyes turned red. Have you made enough trouble? If you have, go back. If anything happens to Cousin Xian, I won't spare you. Because he was worried about Ning Kaisian, Di Yen said harshly. He was really worried about Ning Kaisian, who was in poor health. She would get sick at the slightest movement. She was very delicate. Actually, tears fell from Qin Yuru's eyes. After taking 2 steps back, she covered her face with the handkerchief in her hand and ran back. Seeing that the situation was not good, Mei Shui hurriedly called her miss to chase after her. Seeing that Qin Yuru left the carriage and ran away, Di Yen was also anxious. He turned around and wanted to pull Qin Yuru, but his hand was caught by Ning Kaisian. She looked at Di Yen with a pale face and said, Cousin, you go after first Miss Qin. She is just jealous of us. Although she said that she wanted Di Yen to go, she held him tightly, as if she would get into trouble if Di Yen left. I'll go and have a look. Seeing that Qin Yuru had already disappeared, Di Yen panicked. He was worried about Ning Kaisian and Qin Yuru. If something really happened to Qin Yuru, he would not be able to explain it to his grandmother. But he didn't dare to leave. Ning Kaisian was so weak that she couldn't stand too much suffering. If something really happened to her, what should he do? At this point, the sweat on his forehead came down. The doctor is here. The doctor is here. Someone shouted from outside the crowd, and the crowd hurriedly let the doctor in. A middle-aged doctor rushed in with a medicine box on his back. He was sweating profusely, and it could be seen that he was really anxious. I don't know this doctor. I don't want him. Ning Kaisian said, short of breath. Quick, go and invite the young miss who has been waiting for you. The old doctor. Di Yen hurriedly said to Ning Caishien's maid. At this time, you still want to pick a doctor. Could it be that this illness is fake? Yu Jia shouted in the crowd. Qin Wanru had already gotten out of the carriage when Qin Yuru was making a scene. She had asked the coachman to invite the doctor, and Qin Wanru had already picked the doctor before the battle. Qin Wanru had already picked the doctor. That's right. Who doesn't see a doctor? At this time, he still has the energy to pick a doctor. Is he really a fake? Is this some kind of trick? I still don't understand what is going on. But this first miss does have a private relationship with a man. I just don't know whether it is with the heir of the Duke in front of us or with another man. The crowd began to talk about it. It was so chaotic that everyone couldn't figure out who was telling the truth and who was not. But there was one thing that people who watched the whole scene could be sure of. The first Miss Ning, who looked delicate, seemed to have a bad character and seemed to have a relationship with a man. The misses of the Ning's mansion are not good. Last time I saw the second miss of their mansion, she was like a prostitute, pulling a man at the door. This was the person who saw the second Miss Ning and the nephew of Duke Xing pulling. Although it didn't happen often, it would happen once or twice occasionally. Speaking of which, last time I saw the first Miss Ning was sent back by this child, who was extremely delicate. It seemed that he carried her into the mansion. Someone in the surrounding shops said, who had seen what had happened between Ning Kaisian and Di Yen. Hearing the words in her ears, Ning Kaisian was anxious and flustered. Her face turned blue and white for a while, and she felt that it was increasingly difficult for her to breathe. She grasped Di Yan's hand tightly and refused to let go. But she still stretched out her other hand to let the middle-aged doctor feel her pulse, not daring to make any more comments. After feeling her pulse, the middle-aged doctor looked at Ning Caishien's face and frowned in confusion. Miss, please stretch out your other hand. Di Yen took her other hand and came over. The doctor reached out to feel her pulse. After feeling it, he looked at her pale face, which was almost bloodless. "Doctor, how is it? What kind of first aid should we do?" Seeing the doctor put down his hand, Di Yen asked anxiously. "What kind of first aid should we do? Isn't she fine?" The doctor wiped his hand with a handkerchief and said without raising his head. "What?" Di Yen felt that he did not understand and asked in astonishment, "Doctor, how do you say first aid?" "I said there is no need for first aid. She is just a little weak in qi and blood, and there is nothing wrong with her." The doctor stood up, picked up the medicine box, and seemed to be about to leave. He shook his head and said, "This is all because of the medicine. Why did she make such a fuss? She was in a bad mood and almost fainted." "What is this? What did you say?" Di Yen could hardly believe his ears. "I said, this lady of yours is just weak in qi because of the noise. Besides, she is a little anemic and has no other diseases, so she doesn't need first aid. I thought something serious had happened. It's really enough to waste so much time," the middle-aged doctor said angrily. He had been treating a patient before, but he was hurriedly pulled over by a servant girl, who said that someone might die. Nothing happened?" Di Yen said in astonishment, a little dumbfounded. In his opinion, Ning Zaixian's body was really weak. Usually, she would cause a lot of trouble at the slightest sign of trouble. Today, she made such a big fuss, so how could she be fine? I have been weak since childhood. Doctor, are you mistaken?" Ning Zaixian also said anxiously. She stood up with Di Yan's hand and said angrily to the doctor's back, "I'm not mistaken. If you don't believe me, you can ask an Imperial physician to see her. My grandfather is from the Imperial Institute of Medicine." Hearing that Qin Yuru doubted his medical skills, the doctor turned his head unhappily and looked Ning Zaixian up and down. "Miss, I don't care what you are doing, but don't use this kind of thing to fool others. It is a matter of life and death, and you can't afford to make trouble." After saying that, he turned around and left. He actually ignored Ning Zaixian. "Cousin Di, where is my big sister?" Qin Wanru appeared in the gap where the doctor left. She still looked dusty, but the fancy hairpin on her head had been removed, leaving only a simple butterfly knot. Although it was inconspicuous, it was not an eyesore. Under her thick bangs, one could see the anger on her face. But Di Yen was really dumbfounded at this time. Things happened one after another, and they were all accidents. Where did Qin Wanru come from at this time? Didn't she go back to the mansion early? "Cousin Di, you and my big sister are going to be engaged soon. Who is she? Why are you so intimate with her? Is it possible that you want to marry her instead of my big sister?" Qin Wanru's eyes fell on Ning Zaixian coldly. She looked her up and down and said sarcastically, "She is so sick and weak. She deliberately pretended to hold you back, right?" If these words were said before, Di Yen would not believe it. But before, the doctor said that Ning Zaixian was not seriously ill, and this doctor seemed to have good medical skills. Di Yen was at a loss at this time. Hearing Qin Wanru's words and thinking of Qin Yuru's look of leaving without caring about him, he also panicked. He pulled away Ning Zaixian's hand that was holding him tightly, pushed Ning Zaixian into the arms of her servant girl, and said to Qin Wanru anxiously, "I'm going to find Cousin Yu." Cousin. Ning Zaixian called subconsciously. "First Miss Ning, right? Why are you holding Cousin Di? Is he your fiancé or my big sister's? Could it be possible that you and Cousin Di are secretly accepting my big sister?" Qin Wanru stood in front of Ning Zaixian gracefully, and her voice was a little cold. "Although I am young, I have also heard of such means of pretending to be sick. Isn't it what concubines do? Could it be possible that first Miss Ning is destroying the marriage between Cousin Di and my big sister?" But Ning Zaixian really did not know why things developed like this, and who was this inconspicuous girl in front of her. Her mind was in a mess, and her whole body was trembling. "First Miss Ning, I'm leaving. Don't make trouble. I have to find my big sister. If something happens to my big sister, our Qin's mansion will definitely ask you for justice." Qin Wanru looked her up and down, and then turned to leave with Yujia. Although she came and went in a hurry, she made a comprehensive conclusion of the matter. She is really a bitch. She even wants to destroy other people's marriage. She is still pretending to be sick. It seems that she is going to die. As expected, it is what concubines do. The two misses of Ning's mansion are not good people. The people around understood and immediately burst into laughter. No one would be polite to such a bitch who wanted to destroy other people's marriage. Especially when she pretended to be delicate and didn't let go of Di Yan just now. No one knew who first threw the rotten leaves in his hand, and it hit Ning Caishien's face. Then someone threw eggs, rotten fruits, and some other rotten things. Seeing that the situation was not good, the doorman and servant girl of Ning's mansion hurriedly protected Ning Caisien and retreated into the mansion. But even so, Ning Caisien was still hit by a few rotten eggs, and she retreated to the door in embarrassment. Leaning against the door, Ning Caisien gasped heavily. She felt that she was out of breath and wanted to faint. In the past, she had always been delicate and had never suffered like this. Everyone was careful when dealing with her, for fear that she would faint if they were not careful enough, and that would be a little unpleasant to hear. "First, miss, let me take you to change clothes first. This is too smelly." The servant girl pulled her and ran inside, while pinching her nose and saying. Chapter 203. What are you doing? Ning Caisien covered her chest and gasped, glaring at Ning Xueqing who was standing in front of her. "What am I doing? I want to ask you, what are you doing? Ning Caisien, you are so good today. You are so famous, but you have ruined my reputation. What can you do to compensate me?" Ning Xueqing looked down at Ning Caisien with disdain. You only do some coquettish things. What reputation do you have?" Ning Caisien glared back at her unwillingly. "It doesn't matter what I do. At least I won't let people block the door and curse me for robbing someone's marriage. You are so despicable." Ning Xueqing sneered. "It doesn't matter to me whether or not your reputation is bad, but you are a daughter of the Ning family. Not just me, I'm afraid that the entire bloodline of my family will be affected by you. Just wait to be drowned in a pig cage." After saying that, Ning Xueqing glanced at Ning Caisien contemptuously and turned away. Ning Caisien was so angry that she trembled all over. She heard a light voice in her ear. "Why don't you look at yourself in the mirror? You want to be the wife of the heir so much that you are crazy. Help me up." She gritted her teeth and snapped at the servant girl who stood foolishly beside her. "Yes, first miss." The servant girl quickly reached out and pulled her up. After standing still and slightly gasping, Ning Caisien gritted her teeth and said, "Quick, take me to see my father." At this point, she would not sit still and wait for death. No, she must marry into Duke Yong's mansion. In any case, she would not let go of Di Yan. No matter who stood in her way, she would lift the veil. The venom in her heart overflowed little by little. Qin Yuru had hurt her to this point, so she would never let her go. The unremarkable girl with gray hair and hair just now should be the second miss of Qin's mansion, right? At this moment, Ning Caisien was soberly aware that no one would fancy such an inconspicuous and not so young girl. She couldn't waste the hairpin she had given her at that time on her. In this case, she would push the matter of dealing with the second miss of Qin's mansion to the first miss of Qin's mansion. Since the people of Qin's mansion were ruthless, they could not blame her for being ruthless. When Qin Wanru's carriage returned to the mansion was in a mess. Madame D ignored her health and rushed to Duke Yong's mansion with Qin Yuru. Madame Dowager originally wanted to stop Madame D for a while and then make a long-term plan, but was stopped by Shui Ruolin, so she let Madame D solve it herself. After greeting Madame Dowager, he told her what he had seen. Madame Dowager sighed and said, "The heir of Duke Yong's mansion is not a good match." Old grandma was old and experienced many things, so she had seen many people. She felt that Di Yan was no match for Qi Tianyu. However, Madame D insisted on breaking off the marriage and even schemed against Qin Wanru. Now it was hard for her to make a concession. "Mother, we can't intervene in this matter. Let them solve it themselves." Shui Ruolin sat aside and comforted old grandma softly. "You're a lass." Old grandma sighed helplessly and didn't know what to say. "Grandma, can't the marriage be done?" Qin Wanru asked curiously. "No, it can't be done. Even if Madame D is..." It can't be done. Old Grandma said slowly and reached out to rub her forehead, feeling a headache. The marriage between the two families had not been settled yet, but Di Yen was already like this. If it was settled in the future, it would be even worse. Qin Wanru chatted with Old Grandma for a while and left when she saw Old Grandma's look slightly better. After returning from Old Grandma's place, Qin Wanru asked someone to call Dong Xiu'er over. Dong Xiu'er had caught a cold before, so she didn't look well. Qin Wanru asked her to sit on a small stool, and her eyes fell on Dong Xiu'er's face quietly, but she didn't say anything. Dong Xiu'er panicked under Qin Wanru's gaze. She reached out to pinch her handkerchief and crumpled it into a ball. After a long while, seeing that Qin Wanru didn't say anything, she raised her head and looked at Qin Wanru timidly. Then she said, "Second miss, why are you looking for Xiu'er? Is there anything wrong with my mother?" "Xiu'er, you and Nanny Dong followed me to the capital city. After arriving in the capital city, you have been staying in the mansion and almost never left the yard. When did you meet a man outside?" Qin Wanru asked lightly. Her dark watery eyes were shining with moist luster. She looked very quiet, but if you looked closely, you would feel that she had seen through you. Dong Xiu'er's hand trembled, and she almost dropped the handkerchief in her hand. Her face became paler and paler and she murmured, Second miss, I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you understand?" Qin Wanru smiled slightly and said meaningfully. Dong Xiu'er was so scared that she stood up and shook her hands. "Second miss. I really don't know. Please tell me. You really don't know, or you deliberately don't know. In fact, it's very simple. Go and bring Xiu'er here." Qin Wanru leaned back and said with a smile in her eyes. Her words were very kind, and the smile on her face was also very gentle, but it made Dong Xiu'er feel like she had been hit hard in the heart. She took a step back in panic and almost tripped over the square stool she had just sat on. "Second miss, Xiu'er sent a hairpin out. You don't need me to remind you, do you?" Qin Wanru looked at Dong Xiu'er calmly as if she had seen everything. "Second miss." Dong Xiu'er's pale face suddenly turned red. She was so guilty that she almost didn't know what she was saying. "Do you still want to hide it from me? Or would you like to let your mother and me come here to ask?" Qin Wanru's smile became more and more gentle. "Second miss." Dong Xiu'er was ashamed and her eyes were red, but she was still a little hesitant. She looked at Qin Wanru and Qin Yu and Yu Jie standing behind her, and bit her lips, unable to speak. Qin Yu whispered in Qin Wanru's ear, "Miss, I will bring him here and confront him face to face." Qin Wanru nodded. Seeing that Qin Yu was really going to leave, Dong Xiu'er panicked and subconsciously reached out to stop her. She turned to look at Qin Wanru and pleaded, Don't. I will tell you everything." Qin Wanru said slowly, "Say it, I am listening." Dong Xiu'er was trembling all over, and then she covered her face and cried. Qin Wanru said, "Let Xiu'er sit down and pour a glass of water for her." Qin Yu backhandedly helped Dong Xiu'er sit down, and Yu Jie poured a cup of tea for her and put it in front of her. "I am afraid you don't know that the hairpin is now in the hands of a woman." Seeing that Dong Xiu'er was just crying and choking with sobs, Qin Wanru picked up the tea at her hand and took a sip, then said lightly, "What?" Dong Xiu'er stopped crying and raised her tear-stained face in astonishment. "Is it very strange?" Qin Wanru raised her beautiful eyebrows. "It is a trap set by a woman. No matter who you met, I don't think you will fall in love with a woman at first sight and give her the hairpin in private. The most important thing is that the hairpin is engraved with the character Qin. You are my maid, so the hairpin engraved with the character Qin should be mine." Qin Wanru said with a slightly serious face. How could it be?" Dong Xiu'er said in shock. "Nothing is impossible. Xiu'er, I don't know if you are so well protected by Nanny Dong that you don't even know the ways of the world." Qin Wanru confirmed. "But this hairpin was given to me by Qin Shui." Dong Xiu'er's eyes were red and she looked incredulous. Qin Wanru said coldly, "Do you think anyone can have such a hairpin? You have lived with your mother in Jiangzhou for such a period of time, so you should have gone to the jewelry store to have a look. Can such an accessory really belong to a maid like Qin Shui?" Her words made Dong Xiu'er speechless for a while. In fact, she had been panicking. Since she got the hairpin given to her by Qing Shui, was this actually one of the reasons why she subconsciously gave this hot hairpin away? Dong Xiu'er, Nanny Dong came to the capital city because of me. I thought Nanny Dong's craftsmanship was good, so I brought her to the capital city. She also did a good job. Nanny Dong and I can be regarded as guests and hosts who get along well with each other. If Nanny Dong was finally dismissed because of you, you should know the final result. The capital city is not Jiangzhou, where you are unfamiliar with the people and the place. Anything can happen. Qin Wanru's face turned cold, and her watery eyes fell on Dong Xiu'er like ice. Did you really give that hairpin away without thinking about anything? In the past, she looked gentle, just a little miss who had not grown up, and she had always been kind to Dong Xiu'er. Now her face turned cold, and her icy momentum made Dong Xiu'er not dare to despise her anymore. Every time she sobered up, she realized that the person in front of her was not the same as her, but the second miss of Ningyuan Army General's mansion, the person who could decide the fate of her mother and herself. The secret in her heart loosened in fear. She did not dare to look at Qin Wanru, lowered her head, twisted the handkerchief in her hand, bit her lip, and said sadly, "Second miss, was my hairpin really taken away by a woman?" It was a woman, and she was the one who had a dispute with first miss today. If it were not for Nanny Dong Xiu'er, I actually would not care about your business. Qin Wanru said with a little coldness. If she had not found out early and brought up the matter between Ning Kaixian and Di Yan, she would have been inexplicably harmed. At that time, even if she had a whole body full of mouths, she would not be able to explain herself. Dong Xiu'er had not been out of the mansion, and she was the one who went out. Dong Xiu'er did not have that kind of hairpin, so she could only have the hairpin. Sensen had targeted her in all kinds of ways. She, who could not explain herself, might go back to the old way in her last life. Madame D viciously used Ning Kaixian to ruin her, but now it was Qin Yuru or herself who would be ruined. Chapter 204. Dong Xiu'er's story was simple. The hairpin was given to her by Qing Shui, who said that it was a reward from her master. Qing Shui said that although she was a principal maid in Jifang Pavilion, she was not favored. In the past, second miss did not really treat her as a confidant. The purpose of giving the hairpin to Dong Xiu'er was not only to make friends with her, but also to let Nanny Dong put in a good word for her. Dong Xiu'er saw Qing Shui's situation in Jifang Pavilion clearly, so she felt that what Qing Shui said was true. Therefore, she accepted the hairpin after Qing Shui repeatedly hinted. Dong Xiu'er once saw the man when she accompanied Qing Shui to Madame D's place to do something. Originally, Qing Shui and her maid Chu went together. But when they were about to leave, Chu suddenly had a stomachache, so she asked Dong Xiu'er to help her. Dong Xiu'er then happily went. On that day, Qin Wanru was not in the mansion, and Nanny Yu was called away by Shui Rulan. Dong Xiu'er left with Qing Shui very carefully, so no one noticed that she had left. And on that day, she saw a handsome man. After the two of them accidentally bumped into each other, the man gently pulled her up. Then, he affectionately asked for her name and said that he had never seen a woman like her before. He fell in love with her at first sight and wanted to ask the elders of her family to marry her. Dong Xiu'er had been protected by Nanny Dong in the past, so she had never seen such an affectionate and gentle man. She blushed for a moment, but she still told him her name. Then the man left a jade pendant as a keepsake and left. When Qing Shui came over, she happened to see the man saying goodbye to Dong Xiu'er and asking her to take good care of her. He said that it would not be long before he came to marry Dong Xiu'er. Although Dong Xiu'er was older, she had never encountered such a thing. At that time, she was also frightened. But later, Qing Shui repeatedly said that the man was good. He was a cousin who had a relationship with Qin's mansion and was a Xiucai. His family had some property, a good reputation, and a good talent. If she could marry this man, she would not have to work so hard in the future. Dong Xiu'er said a lot of nice things about this man. She was really moved. She hid the jade pendant and came back with Qing Shui. Then, Qing Shui brought a letter from time to time, saying that when the Xiucai entered the mansion, he secretly had someone send it to her place and asked her to bring it to Dong Xiu'er. After a while, Dong Xiao was full of wanting to marry this promising Xiaocai. Qing Shui also said that the Xiaocai had given her a jade pendant, so she had to express her gratitude. Qing Shui hinted that the jade pendant was very valuable, so she had to give him something of equal value. The only thing she had in her hands was the hairpin that Qing Shui had asked Madame Dong to put in a good word for her. That was how Chu came to send the hairpin. As for the place, Qing Shui had helped her discuss it before. Cousin? Qin Wanru looked at Qin Yu. Compared with Yu Jie, Qin Yu knew more about the affairs in the mansion. Qin Yu thought for a while and said with certainty, "No, our Qin's mansion has just moved here. Madame D's maiden family is Duke Yong's mansion. If he is not from Duke Yong's mansion, he has no other cousin." Qin Wanru narrowed her eyes and said, "Then where did he come from?" "Miss, I'll go and check." Qin Yu turned to leave, but was stopped by Qin Wanru. "Xiao, how long ago did you see him?" "About a month ago." Dong Xiao bit her lip, lowered her head, and told her the matter clearly. Qin Wanru was silent for a while and said, "It's been more than a month. I'm afraid it's hard to find out. Too much time had passed." "Didn't you say that there were always letters sent here?" Qin Yu said in confusion, "Since there are letters, we can naturally find out who has been coming here recently. A man in the backyard should be able to find out." Yu Jie shook her head and said, "A letter doesn't have to come here in person." Dong Xiao bit the corner of her lips tightly, and tears fell down her cheeks one by one. By this time, how could she not understand that she had been deceived? It should be Qin Shui's intention to bump into the man that day. "Second miss, it's my fault." Dong Xiao knelt down, covered her face with a handkerchief, and cried. Qin Wanru frowned and looked at Yu Jie. Yu Jie hurried to help Dong Xiao up. After thinking for a while, Qin Wanru asked calmly, "Xiao, if you see this man again, will you know him?" Dong Xiao wiped her tears and said, "I should know him." "Qin Yu, go and find out who came to the mansion." It was a man, a young man with good looks and a gentle manner. Qin Wanru ordered. Qin Yu blinked blankly and said, "Miss, didn't you say you couldn't find him? Go and find out first." "It doesn't matter if you can't find him," Qin Wanru said indifferently. "This was just an idle game." "Yes, miss." Qin Yu left in a hurry. After carefully analyzing these things, Qin Wanru had already thought about it. A trace of darkness flashed at the bottom of her eyes. She ordered Dong Xiao to say a few words and let her go back. Then she asked Yu Jie to find Chu Lu. After Chu Lu bowed, Qin Wanru asked, "What's the matter with Qing Shui recently?" "I didn't find anything unusual about her. She mostly went to Dong Xiao's place. If something happened, she would help you. If nothing happened, she was very quiet." Chu Lu said. The task that Qin Wanru gave her was to keep an eye on Qin Shui. Qin Wanru said, "Nothing unusual recently?" "Nothing unusual." Chu Lu shook her head with certainty. "She always looks quiet and doesn't like to talk to me. Sometimes I want to lead her to say something, but she is always very vigilant." "Vigilant?" Qin Wanru's long eyelashes fluttered twice, and a faint smile appeared in her watery eyes. There was nothing unusual because there was nothing unusual. But what if there was something unusual? Coincidentally, today's matter was so unusual that even Madame D couldn't sit still. Regardless of her own health, she went to Duke Yong's mansion to denounce them. Qing Shui sat in front of the window and looked out of it anxiously. Although she looked calm and was embroidering with a set of needles and thread in her hand, in fact, her attention was always outside the window. She heard someone say that Madame D took Qin Yuru to Duke Yong's mansion to denounce them. She also heard that the heir of Duke Yong seemed to have an ambiguous relationship with his cousin. These words made her restless. At this time, when she saw Dong Xiao coming out of Qin Wanru's room with red eyes, she couldn't sit still. But she didn't rush to go to her. After a while, when she saw Chu Lu also enter Qin Wanru's room, she put down the needle and thread in her hand, went out of the door, and went to Dong Xiao's room. When she entered the room and pushed the door open, she saw that Dong Xiao's eyes were still red. At first glance, she knew that she had just cried. She hurried forward with a face full of concern. "What's wrong with you? Did Second Miss scold you?" "Second Miss scolded me." Dong Xiao lowered her head and wiped her tears with a handkerchief. Why did second miss scold you? You've always been the most obedient in the yard. You don't go out on weekdays and only do some embroidery and toggle and loop buttons. What else do you want? Qing Shui sat down beside her, held her hand, and lowered her voice to say angrily. Then she became a little disheartened. Second miss likes smart girls, and people like us who can't talk are not favored. These words seemed to have touched Dong Xiao's heart. She nodded repeatedly and choked with sobs, unable to speak. Well, don't be sad. Tell me why second miss scolded you, Qing Shui said softly and reached out to comfort Dong Xiao on the shoulder. She asked me how many embroidery and toggle and loop buttons I made. After I told her the number, second miss was not satisfied. Not only second miss scolded me, but also Qing Yu and Yu Jie scolded me. They said that I'm not as good as my mother and that I'm a burden to my mother. Dong Xiao lowered her head and wiped her tears again. What are they talking about? You make embroidery and toggle and loop buttons whenever you're free. They're so exquisite. When you put them in the shop, everyone will praise you. How could they say that? Qing Shui was so angry that her face turned pale. She suddenly stood up and walked around the room twice. I also said that it takes a lot of effort. They've gone too far. They let you do this kind of thing because they think you're easy to bully. Xiao, don't be afraid. You still have Nanny Dong. Even if they say that, you'll be fine as long as Nanny Dong is here, Qing Shui said angrily. Qing Shui said angrily. Her delicate little face seemed to be filled with anger for Dong Xiao. Dong Xiao bit her lip and blushed. Her voice was almost like a mosquito's whisper. Qing Shui, when do you think we'll marry me? I really want to leave here. Oh, don't worry. Soon it should be soon. Qing Shui didn't realize it at first, but she immediately understood and said hurriedly. Then she sat down beside Dong Xiao. But I can't stay here for a while. It's too depressing here. Dong Xiao lowered her head with a red face and said in frustration. Don't say such discouraging words. Even if second miss doesn't like you, you have Nanny Dong. For Nanny Dong's sake, she can't say anything, right? Qing Shui said softly. But I feel uneasy. I want to see him. Dong Xiao cried again. Her tears fell one by one, and her face was immediately covered with tears. She turned around and held Qing Shui's hand. Sister Qing Shui, can you help me? I just want to see him. I'll be uneasy if I don't see him. This is not a good time, is it? Qing Shui said hesitantly. Even if I can't see him, it's okay to see a letter. Sister Qing Shui, please help me. Otherwise, I really can't wait any longer. I'd better tell second miss and ask her to let me go. Just tell her that someone wants to marry me. Dong Xiao wiped her tears and said desperately. Qing Shui said anxiously, you can't do that. If second miss knows, you'll be finished. I don't care. Otherwise, I can't wait any longer. Dong Xiao turned away with a willful look. Then I'll go and have a look. Qing Shui had a headache. She knew that man, but she had never seen him except for the first time when he came to her in person. After that, it was Madame D who brought her letters. Moreover, Madame D was not in the mansion at the moment. Chapter 205. Qing Shui went out and quietly took Dong Xiao with her. Since something happened to the first miss in the mansion, the second miss went to Madame Dowager's place to comfort her. The servants in the yard were also busy, so no one noticed that Qing Shui had left after coming back. However, even if they noticed, everyone was secretly speculating about the first Mississippi. It was not a big deal to talk about it in private with a few people they could talk about it. Qing Shui took Dong Xiao to the back door under such circumstances. The old maid at the back door had been sent away by Qing Shui. When Dong Xiao followed Qing Shui to the back door, she saw the man she missed standing under the tree at the door from a distance. She was so sad that her eyes turned red before she reached him. Xiao, you should be happy. You see, as soon as I went out to tell him, he came right away. I was afraid you would be worried. Qing Shui quickly comforted her. Then, she took her to the man dressed like a scholar and was about to leave. However, her hand was grabbed by Dong Xiao. Dong Xiao trembled slightly and pulled her sleeve, looking at her imploringly, motioning her not to go. Qing Shui reached out to pull her sleeve and said, "I'll stay here and see if anyone is coming." Dong Xiu'er held her sleeves tightly, and she seemed to be unwilling to let go no matter what. Qing Shui helplessly turned to the handsome scholar with a bitter smile. The scholar took a step forward and said softly to Dong Xiu'er, "Miss Dong, let him go first. I have something to tell you." Dong Xiu'er looked at the scholar in front of her, lowered her head slightly, and looked at her toes. "I want to be with her." "You say it?" The scholar hesitated and said, "It's not convenient for her to be here." "No, it's not convenient. She knows everything about me." Dong Xiu'er still looked at her toes, but her hand was holding Qing Shui tightly. No matter how hard Qing Shui pulled her hand, she would not let go. "But this," Dong Xiu'er whispered, "did you get the hairpin I gave you last time?" "Yes, thank you, Miss Dong." A trace of impatience flashed in the scholar's eyes. Fortunately, Dong Xiu'er lowered her head and could not see his expression. Dong Xiu'er seemed to be immersed in her own imagination and said, "What do you think?" "It's very delicate." "Thank you, Miss Dong." "There's a spot on the hairpin that's broken. Do you see it?" "I accidentally hit it, but it's not a big one." Dong Xiu'er moved her feet slightly. She bit her lip, and her hands trembled slightly. "I saw it. It doesn't matter. After you marry me, I'll take you to buy a new hairpin." The scholar's voice was very gentle. It was a stark contrast to the impatience on his face. Dong Xiu'er suddenly raised her head and looked at the impatient expression on the scholar's face with tears in her eyes. At that moment she no longer had any doubts. Not only the scholar, but also Qing Shui was very unhappy with Dong Xiu'er's clingy behavior. At this moment, they were also squinting at her. No one expected that Dong Xiu'er would raise her head at that moment. For a moment, both of them were stunned. Dong Xiu'er's hand slipped from Qing Shui's. She pointed at the two hands in front of her, covered her face with a handkerchief, and ran away in tears. Today, Qing Shui was anxious and was about to chase after her, but her sleeve was pulled by the scholar. "What's going on?" The scholar's face darkened, and he asked unhappily, "Did you ask me to come here in a hurry just to see this silly woman make a scene?" Qing Shui said anxiously, "No, you have to comfort her." "Comfort her? Who can comfort her like this? She's making a scene as if she's really a miss in the mansion." "Give me money," the scholar said unhappily. In fact, he was a local ruffian in the city. He was quite handsome, and he was asked to put on such a show. They had agreed that it would only be the first time, but he didn't expect that he would be asked to do it again in a hurry. "The old maid who came to invite you didn't pay? I'll talk to Madam later and ask her to send you the money." "Madam isn't here right now. You should go back and wait." Qing Shui didn't expect the scholar to ask for money from her and said hurriedly. It was Madame D's people who went to look for the scholar. Now that Madame D was not here, she must have no place to take the money. "No money?" The ruffian who was dressed like a scholar turned his head and looked at Qing Shui. Then, he pointed at the pair of earrings hanging on Qing Shui's ears rudely and said, "Who knows if you will go back on your word? Give this to me first and I'll give you the money later." Qing Shui's expression changed drastically. "What's wrong with me? You guys hired me to put on a show to deceive that silly woman. You're so old and you look like this, yet you want to imitate others and have a private date. You might as well do it. Maybe I won't take the money." The local ruffian said frivolously. He pulled Qing Shui closer and directly reached out to take off her earrings. He even gently pinched her pink face. Qing Shui was angry and ashamed. She pushed the ruffian with both hands. When the ruffian saw such a delicate servant girl and there was no one around, how could he let her go so easily? He simply reached out, grabbed her hands and pulled her into his arms. At the same time, he kissed Qing Shui's face. Just as the two of them were entangled, they suddenly heard someone shout, "Men, capture the two of them!" The ruffian was so scared that he wanted to run away. Unfortunately, he had already been stopped by two rough old maids. When Qing Shui and the ruffian were sent to old grandma's place, Qin Wanru was still there. She casually looked at the two people below and slightly raised the corner of her mouth. Chu Lu was talking about the process in which she brought people to catch the two people. She said that she accidentally passed by the backyard and saw the two people pulling and hugging each other. She hurriedly went back to find the old maid supervisor of the mansion and caught the two people. Qin Wanru's eyes fell on Qing Shui and said calmly, "Grandma, send them directly to the government. It's better to let the government judge this kind of thing. It's just a matter of a servant girl." Second miss, I've been wronged. This person has nothing to do with me. When I walked to the backyard, this person jumped out from behind the tree and grabbed me. Qing Shui was anxious when she heard that Qin Wanru was going to send her to the government office without saying anything. She pointed at the ruffian and said, Second miss, I've been wronged. So it's about this person? He dared to hit on the servant girl of Ningyuan Army General's mansion and conspired against Ningyuan Army General's mansion. Even if he doesn't die, he will be disabled. Qin Wanru casually put down the cup and said slowly in a low voice, Second miss, it was the servant girl of your mansion who invited me here. She specially asked an old maid to come here. It was she who wanted to meet me privately. It was not me who wanted to hit on the servant girl of your mansion. The ruffian also panicked and said hurriedly. It was not a big deal for a ruffian to have an affair between two people. But if they conspired against Ningyuan Army General's mansion, it would not be a small matter. Nonsense, it's you. It's you who is talking nonsense. It was obviously your mansion who invited me. How dare you deny it now? In order to shirk the responsibility, the two of them began to shift the blame to each other. Grandma, let the two old maids take them to one side and interrogate them, lest they talk nonsense. Qin Wanru suggested to Madame Dowager. Madame Dowager nodded and narrowed her eyes to signal Nanny Duan. Nanny Duan understood and asked someone to take the two people to two empty rooms on the left and right side. Qin Wanru stood up and said, Nanny Duan, you go to interrogate the man. I'll ask Qing Shui. You want to interrogate him yourself? Madame Dowager said disapprovingly. This kind of thing was obviously not a good thing. Madame Dowager did not want Qin Wanru to get too involved, lest her reputation would be damaged. It did not look simple. Grandma, Qing Shui is my servant girl. Even if she did something, it may involve me. I'd better ask her clearly. Qin Wanru looked at Madame Dowager and said softly with a smile. Madame Dowager thought about it and nodded helplessly. Even though she wanted to protect her little granddaughter, she was powerless. If Shuozhua could grow up faster, it would also be a good thing. Qin Wanru asked Yujie to follow Nanny Duan to interrogate the scholarly ruffian. Qin Wanru took Qing Yu to the room where Qing Shui was locked up and sat down after entering. Second miss, I'm really wronged. As soon as Qing Shui saw Qin Wanru come in, she burst into tears and was about to rush over to hug Qin Wanru's leg, but was stopped by Yujie. Qing Shui, what else do you have to say? Yujie said sternly. Second miss, I'm really wronged. I didn't do anything. I just helped Xiao to make an appointment. Second miss, you have to believe me. If you don't believe me, you can ask Dong Xiao. She knows everything. It's really not that I have an affair with this man. It's Xiao. Qing Shui burst into tears. What she said was also half true, but it sounded like it was true. If this was not a trap set up by Qin Wanru, she might also believe her. Qin Wanru gently tapped her fingers on the table. Her smile was very gentle, and there seemed to be a smile in her eyes. Qing Shui, you've been with me for a while. Do you think I'm a person who is easy to deceive? Or do you think I'm young and insensible like others and can be easily bullied? Her eyes fell on Qing Shui's face, and she smiled gently. Today, she was dressed as usual. Her heavy bangs had already been pinned up. Her little face was angry and happy at the same time, showing a kind of indifference and leisure that was different from her age, as if the person in front of her was not her principal servant girl. As if what was happening in front of her was not a scandal that happened around her. As if she had been used to this kind of thing, Qing Shui began to tremble. It was not the kind of scream that deliberately dragged out her voice just now, but she was really trembling. Her teeth were chattering, and a chill rose in her heart, causing her to directly collapse to the ground. Was Qin Wanru a master who was bullied? Of course not. Since she followed Qin Wanru, she had been careful, because she felt that this master was so clever that she dared not to take any action. She could only lurk in the dark and wait for the right opportunity. When the matter of Dong Xiu was carried out quietly, she was still secretly complacent. After all, she was just a young lady who had not grown up. Even if she was clever, it was useless. Now, when she saw this pair of eyes that seemed to see through everything, she realized how wrong she was. Chapter 206. Are you blaming me? Qin Wanru smiled slightly, picked up the teacup at hand, and took a sip. The mist passed through her thick and curly long eyelashes, making her face look unreal and charming. In the past, her delicate little face only had a kind of childish beauty. Because she was still a child, this kind of beauty was still associated with cuteness. Everyone could guess that after she grew up, her appearance would be peerless, but at this time, they would not have much hostility towards her, because her beauty was still a kind of delicate childish beauty. But Qin Wanru behind the mist was unreal, as if she suddenly changed from childish to ethereal and beautiful. Behind the clouds, she seemed to grow up all of a sudden. She was weak with charm, but also cold and beautiful, and even had a kind of chill that made Qin Shui tremble. Qin Shui, you were bought as a slave early, but you did not enter Ningyuan Army General's mansion. Instead, you were raised in a farm, where there were old maids to discipline you. You were smart and good-looking, so you were bought into Qin's mansion for the second time, and then you became my servant girl. But unfortunately, Chu Lu was also bought with you. She happened to know you when she was a child, and also knew that you had been bought into Qin's mansion. Qin Wanru's eyes fell on Qin Shui slightly. Second miss, you were bought, of course, to deal with me. You were placed by my side, and at least you would know some of my actions. And you are smart, and you would not follow the previous path of Qing Chui. Of course, at the beginning, Madame D left you in the farm not to deal with me, but to cultivate you to be Big Sister's personal servant girl. Qin Wanru continued to say in a low and slow voice. Her soft voice was very pleasant, but fell in Qin Shui's ears like the evening drum and morning bell, and shocked her so much that she almost stared blankly. Not many people knew these things, even Chu Lu did not know. Now that they had arrived in the capital, it was even more impossible to inquire about what happened in the past. But Qin Wanru said it so clearly, as if she was also present at that time. You must be very unwilling. Qin Wanru smiled more gently. She blinked her clear eyes and tilted her head slightly, which made her look a little childish. You think Big Sister is going to be the young madam of Duke Yong, and I, who has been suppressed, will not have a good end. So you are anxious. You volunteered for Dong Xiu, didn't you? Qin Shui's face was as white as snow. It was even paler than when she was caught in front of Madame Dowager. Her eyes were filled with despair. What could be more despairing than being secretly delighted while actually falling into the trap of the person she had schemed against? She thought that she had schemed against Second Mississippi. Madame thought that she had schemed against Second Miss. But in fact, they were the ones who had been tricked. Do you know what will happen if I send you to the yamen? You, a maid, had an affair with a local ruffian and even schemed against your Mississippi. You will be sent to the army after your face is stamped with a word. My father has just become the Ningyuan Army General. There are many people in the capital city who are willing to befriend my father. Qin Wanru narrowed her eyes slightly and continued. Every word was like a sharp sword stabbing into Qin Shui's most secret heart. As soon as these words were said, Qin Shui could no longer stand it. She fell to the ground in tears and snot. This time she really broke down. Second miss, I will tell you everything. As long as you don't send me to the yamen, I will tell you everything. After the interrogation of Qin Wanru, Nanny Duan also finished. After the interrogation of both sides, Qin Wanru took Qin Shui away, leaving the local ruffian to be locked up. Although this kind of thing was a maid's business, it was easy to taint Mrs. reputation. When Madame D came back, Countess Yong also came with her. Madame D took her to see Madame Dowager. Today, Countess Yong came to Qin's mansion to talk about Qin Yuru and Di Yen. The two families decided to get engaged immediately. This time, she specially brought the 7th-generation invitation card to exchange for Qin Yuru's 7th-generation invitation card. After 2-generation invitation cards were calculated, the ceremony could be officially held. As for Qin Yuru's marriage, Madame Dowager knew that she could not intervene. So no matter what Countess Yong and Madame D said, she agreed and followed Madame D's decision. Qin Huaiyong had also hinted to Madame Dowager that the marriage between Ningyuan Army General's mansion and Duke Yong's mansion was also imperative. Since both of them thought it was good, Madame Dowager certainly could not say anything. After talking to Madame Dowager about this, it could be considered that this matter was told to the most senior elder in the family. Madame D and Countess Yong returned to Yulon Pavilion. In front of Madame Dowager, it was just a notice. The specific matters had to be decided by them. Others did not know what Di Yen and Countess Yong talked about in the room. They only knew that when Countess Yong left the mansion, the marriage was officially set. The next day, Di Yen even moved to Qin's mansion. He could not study well, so he wanted to learn martial arts. On the one hand, Ningyuan Army General's mansion did not have many people. On the other hand, Di Yen might take the path of a general in the future, so he could learn some basic knowledge from Qin Huaiyong. Of course, this was just what they said on the surface. In fact, Duke Yong's mansion temporarily sent Di Yen to Qin's mansion and let Madame D take care of him, so that he would not get involved with Ning Kaixian again. Of course, this was the idea of Old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion. Old Madame disliked Ning Kaixian very much. When she was in the mansion, she did not treat her well. She always liked her granddaughter Qin Yuru. Originally, Countess Yong did not agree with this. But after the previous incident, Ning Kaixian's reputation was greatly damaged. It was said that now all the people in the capital city were talking about Ning's mansion. Not only Ning Kaixian, but also her younger sister Ning Xueqing. It was said that she also hooked up with a young master of Duke Xing's mansion. At first glance, it was obvious that they were not on the right path. There were some things that people did not know, but the more they talked about it, the more they felt the sisters were despicable. Even if the young lady of an aristocratic family was ruined, she still had her own strength of character. How could she be so undisciplined as to do such a thing? She actually pulled on a man who was already engaged, and even threw herself into his arms. From what they said, the relationship between the two of them was very unclear. This kind of thing, anyone who heard it would feel disgusted. Only some libertines thought it was very attractive and envied Di Yen. They only thought that it would be good if there were 7 or 8 such delicate cousins. Some mansions that had been in contact with Ning's mansion before disdained them one after another. Now they all told their daughters not to have any contact with the Ning sisters, for fear of being infected with such a bad reputation. For a while, the reputation of the Ning sisters in the capital city could not be worse. In this way, it was impossible for them to marry again. Even an ordinary respectable family would not be able to marry them legally. The next few days were peaceful. The Ning sisters seemed to be beaten to the point that they could not fight back and could only live with their tails between their legs. There were many people in front of the gate of Ning's mansion every day. But basically, the gate of Ning's mansion was not opened. Only the carriage of the Ning sisters' father occasionally came in and out. Di Yen seemed to be very well behaved these days. He almost did not go out and stayed in the mansion every day. If he was not talking to Madame D, he was accompanying Qin Yuru. Occasionally he would ask Qin Huaiyong about some military books. He even did not come out of the study in his courtyard and read books peacefully. It was as if what happened outside had nothing to do with him. In this regard, Madame D and Qin Yuru were very satisfied. Qin Yuru returned to her gentle appearance, but now what she liked most was to greet old grandma with Di Yen. In this way, she could see Qin Wanru on the road or in old grandma's room. She was very proud. Now she was about to become the young madam of Duke Yong's mansion and Qin Wanru. Mother said that she was just a bitch and she would not let her have a good end. On this day, Qin Wanru was in old grandma's Xining pavilion. Suddenly, someone came to Qin Wanru. Qin Shui hurried out to find Qin Wanru, but was stopped not far from the courtyard gate. "Miss Qin Shui, someone sent a letter to you." An old maid came out from behind the tree with a smile and stopped Qin Shui. She took out a letter from her arms and handed it to her. "Who is it?" Qin Shui took it and asked casually. She opened the letter on the spot and read it. It is said that Miss Qing Shue's aunt looks old. She heard that Miss Qing Shue is in Ningyuan Army General's mansion, so she specially came to find you. She was afraid that I could not explain it clearly, so she sent you a letter, the old maid said. Where is she? There were not many words in the letter. Qing Shue had already finished reading it. She folded the letter again and asked. She is in the back garden. If Miss Qing Shue goes there now, you should be able to see her. The old maid said. Thank you very much. Qing Shue said. Miss Qing Shue, you are welcome. The old maid waved her hand and left with a smile. As a principal servant girl in the mansion, Qing Shue would help as much as she could. No one knew when she could speak in front of her master. Even if she could be familiar with her master, it would be good. Qing Shue stood where she was and did not leave immediately. She picked up the letter in her hand and opened it to read it. Her face became serious. She bit her lip and thought for a while. Then she turned back to Jifeng Pavilion, pulled Chu Lu aside, and said a few words before leaving. Chu Lu followed her out of the courtyard. They separated at the gate of the courtyard. One went to find Qin Wanru, and the other went to the back door to see the aunt. The so-called aunt did have a person before. It was Madame D who asked Qing Shue to contact her in order to let Dong Xiu'er send the hairpin. Although Dong Xiu'er was embarrassed to ask her servant girl Chu Er to send the hairpin in front of her, she had been paying attention to Dong Xiu'er. How could she not know? On the day when the hairpin was sent, it was also she who passed the news to the aunt and brought it out. As for other things, Qing Shue did not know. She only knew that Madame D asked her to listen to the words of the aunt. She also told the aunt how her second miss was on good terms with Child D, how beautiful her second miss was, and how much Child D cared about her. Chapter 207. In the backyard, an old maid was pacing back and forth anxiously. Finally, she heard the sound of the door behind her. She looked back hurriedly and saw Qing Shue coming in a hurry. She was overjoyed and reached out to pull her to a corner. She looked at the door and breathed a sigh of relief when she found no one else was following them. Aunt, what else can I do for you? Qing Shue unhappily shook off the old maid's hand and asked, Didn't you say you wouldn't come again? The so-called before referred to after she sent out the news that Dong Xiu'er was going to give her the hairpin. Something happened again. The hairpin is missing. The aunt said helplessly. How could it be missing? Isn't it all done? Qing Shue said anxiously. Anyone who finally sent something out would be anxious when they heard it was missing. Don't worry. Our miss is trying to find a way. The old maid said with a flattering smile. What else can we do? Qing Shue spread out her hands and said, There is only one hairpin, and there can't be more. Now where can we find another hairpin? How does your miss do things? Qing Shue's face became more and more unpleasant. The old maid hesitated for a moment and said, How about you find another one? What? Where can we find one? Qing Shue raised her voice unconsciously, which scared the old maid. She hurriedly reached out to cover Qing Shue's mouth and whispered, Oh, my little lady, please be quiet. It's not good if others hear it. I don't have a place to find another one. Madame's people only asked me to cooperate with you and send some news. They didn't ask me to find another hairpin for you. Qing Shue pushed away the old maid's hand angrily and said, The hairpin was originally given to me by Madame. Otherwise, how could I get such a precious thing? If one of you is missing, we have to pay for it. The old maid took out a delicate hairpin from her arms and handed it to Qing Shue. Well, it's our miss who lost the hairpin. Now I'll give you another one. This is... Qing Shue said in confusion. And this pair of earrings is a gift from our Mississippi. We've troubled you for a long time, and our miss is very grateful. Has your madam asked you to do anything recently? The old maid took out a pair of earrings, which were beautiful cat's eye stone earrings. Qing Shue's face became better when she saw them. This earring is for me? Of course it's for you. Thank you for always sending us messages. Although it's Madame D's idea, our miss has to thank you. The old maid put the earrings in Qing Shue's hand happily. With this pair of earrings, their conversation became harmonious. Recently, our mansion has been busy with the marriage of first miss and heir of Duke Yong. Madame has no time to order me to do anything. Besides, I am second Mrs. Servant Girl, So Madame can't intervene in second Miss's affairs. Is your second Miss not on good terms with Madame D? The old maid inquired about the news with a gossipy look and put the matter of the hairpin behind her. This was just an introduction to the story. Of course. Qing Shui put away the earrings and looked around to make sure no one was around. Then she whispered in the old maid's ear, Madame dislikes second Miss the most. She put me beside second Miss to keep an eye on second Mississippi. Keep an eye on your second Miss? What's there to keep an eye on? Your second Miss is not beautiful and is so young. She is even worse than you, a servant girl. What should I keep an eye on? The old maid curled her lips, obviously as if she had seen Qin Wanru before. Inconspicuous and not beautiful? Qing Shui's eyes flickered, thinking that the person who said this was really blind. If second Miss was inconspicuous and not beautiful, who else in this world could be beautiful? Madame just doesn't like second Mississippi. When we were in Jiangzhou, Madame once sent someone to kidnap second Mississippi. At that time, second Miss was still in the temple to pray. Suppressing the sarcasm in her heart, Qing Shui's voice became lower and lower, as if she was completely bought over by the earrings. What? How could there be such a thing? The old maid was shocked. Yes, they wanted to kidnap second Miss and sell her. Qing Shui curled her lips. Your madam is really vicious. The old maid was stunned and whispered. Hearing what she said, Qing Shui lowered her head. For a moment, she seemed to think of something and became speechless. Your madam is so vicious. Now you follow your second Miss and help her do things. If something really happens, you will not have a good ending. The old maid looked very worldly. Qing Shui nodded and said helplessly, but my contract is in madam's hands. You can ask your second Miss to get it. You are her servant girl. Why does your madam have the contract? The old maid rolled her eyes and instigated. Our second Miss is still young and doesn't understand these things. Moreover, because I have been in contact with madam's people before, second Miss doesn't quite believe me. Qing Shui sighed. How can you do this? You're sandwiched between two masters and you're swaying left and right. As a servant, this is the biggest taboo, especially in the capital. As a servant, you must be loyal. Otherwise, you won't have a good time. The old maid looked like an experienced person. She reached out and patted Qing Shui on the shoulder. She agreed and said, you should also make plans early. Otherwise, you are likely to be pushed out to be the scapegoat. Hearing what the old maid said, Qing Shui became listless. She rubbed her toes on the ground and nodded. Take this hairpin first. After it's done, our Miss will definitely thank you heavily. With the status of our Miss, it's not difficult for her to directly ask for you from Madame D or the second Miss of your mansion. In this way, you won't be in a dilemma between the two masters. The old maid pushed the exquisite hairpin in her hand to Qing Shui. Her words seemed to move Qing Shui. She did not refuse at this time and reached out to take it. What should I do? Can this hairpin be sent to your first Miss? The old maid said with a smile. Her Miss was sure that Madame D would not tell her daughter about their previous cooperation. After such a thing happened, Madame D had no time to care about the servant girl. The servant girl definitely did not know that it was her Miss who made trouble. This was a very good loophole. But Qing Shui was shocked and asked in astonishment, what does it have to do with the first Miss? No, I'll go to the first Miss's place now and ask her to give Dong Xiu a hairpin. Otherwise, how could Dong Xiu get such a good hairpin? The old maid asked back, which made Qing Shui speechless. In fact, you don't have to disturb the first Mississippi. You can ask her servant girl. She has to be in touch with the masters. Didn't you say that you are not favored by the second Miss? How can she have such a precious hairpin again and again? Besides, if you ask the first Miss servant girl to do it, even if something goes wrong, you will not be involved, right? The old maid advised. Her words and her previous words made Qing Shui hesitate. Seeing that she did not speak, the old maid knew that she had a chance. She immediately lowered her voice and advised, Miss Qing Shui, with your current status, you'd better not get involved. With your madam's character, you may die an ugly death in the end. You can secretly send this hairpin to the first Miss or her personal servant girl, and then talk to your madam. Your madam will definitely agree. Madam doesn't like to involve the first miss in things. Qing Shui lowered her head uneasily. Then you can secretly put it there. After that, you can tell me. I will find a way to find the first Miss Servant Girl and ask her to find a way to send the hairpin to Dong Xior. In this way, it will have nothing to do with you. Anyway, Madam and our Miss had a good relationship before, so it is not a big deal. The old maid spoke more and more earnestly, and it seemed that she was considering it from Qing Shui's point of view. Can I? Okay, of course you can. As long as you put the hairpin in the first Mrs. or the first Mrs. personal maid's place, it's done. What happens next has nothing to do with you. The old maid pointed at the hairpin and said, I don't know how to send it. You can see the first Miss putting it on the road when she comes here. It is such a beautiful hairpin. Your first Miss will definitely like it. Qing Yu's words were exactly what the old maid wanted. She hurriedly offered away with a smile. In this way, you don't have to show up, and you don't have to associate with the first Mississippi. You can also stay out of it. Well, okay. Qing Yu was persuaded and nodded. I'll be in the shop opposite behind you every day these days. If you put the things away, come to me. Our Miss will do the next thing. The old maid said confidently. But Qing Shui nodded. This matter was settled. Qing Shui also put away the hairpin and returned to the mansion. After closing the back door, Qing Shui smiled at the old maid guarding the door and went back. When she returned to Jifeng Pavilion, Qin Wanru had already returned. After asking to see Qin Wanru in the corridor, Qin Yu led her in. In the room, Qin Wanru also just arrived. First Miss, this was sent by the previous aunt. She said that she would send the hairpin to the first Miss or the first Miss personal servant girl, and this earring is for me. After entering the door, Qing Shui told the whole story in detail. Then she took out all the hairpin and earring and presented them respectfully. Yu Jie came over to take the hairpin and earring and put them on the table in front of Qin Wanru. The earring was inlaid with cat's eye stone. The cat's eye stone was transparent and looked very good. This hairpin was even more exquisite. Qin Wanru's eyes slid over the hairpin, and her eyes became deep. This hairpin was indeed very exquisite, or it could be said that it was different from ordinary exquisite, but this style did not seem to be newly made. Qing Shui did not understand the meaning of this hairpin, but she did. This hairpin was not newly made. It should be handed down from the ancestors. Such a hairpin could not be owned by ordinary families. She picked up the hairpin and looked at it carefully in the light. There seemed to be no mark on it, but under the sunlight, on the butterfly wing lace made of exquisite gold ornaments, there was a very small ancient character. Seeing the character on it clearly, Qin Wanru smiled. What a coincidence, what a coincidence. It seemed that Ning Kaixian had also put a lot of thought into it. Very good. Ning Kaixian, Qin Yuru, and Madame D were not easy to deal with. They were all people who could viciously sacrifice others for their own interests. Then let them fight each other. Chapter 208. Miss, why did Duke Xing's mansion invite you? You didn't have a good time last time, did you? After instructing Qing Shui and asking her to leave, Yu Jie couldn't help asking immediately. Her eyes fell on some gifts on the table. This was also one of the reasons why Qing Shui went to find Qin Wanru in a hurry. It turned out to be a gift from Duke Xing's mansion, and it also said that Madame of Duke Xing liked Qin Wanru very much, so she invited her to the mansion for a chat. There were 2 gift boxes on the table, both open. In one of the gift boxes was a set of brocade clothes. At first glance, one could tell that the clothes were made of a gorgeous material that could not be bought in the market. Qin Wanru reached out her hand and picked up a piece of cloth. The cloth slid past her palm silently. It was delicate and smooth. Such a good material could only be an offering. The finished clothes were made according to her previous height, and there were orchid embroideries on the corners, just like the orchid embroidered on the clothes of her, Qin Yuru and Qi Rongji that day. The only mistake was that she grew a little too fast during this period, and the clothes were short. Madame of Duke Xing had good eyesight and could tell her height and figure at that time at a glance. If she had worn the clothes at that time, they should have been the same. But now, she could not wear them anymore. What a pity! Just a little bit more. There was a trace of deepness in her watery eyes. The slightest mistake could lead to a great difference. This was what the saying went. In the other gift box was a set of hand ornaments with delicate and novel peony patterns, which was the most popular style at present. Looking at the condition of the ornaments, it could be known that they had just been made. Such a gift was given to Qin Wanru, who could be regarded as a casual acquaintance. It was so expensive that it was unacceptable. Just put the things down and left? Qin Wanru picked up a hairpin and looked at it. It was a peony color, wrapped with golden threads, and the workmanship was exquisite. The huge bead in the middle of the flower was round and plump. Just this pearl alone was worth a lot. I heard that they left after putting it down. At that time, Qin Shui stopped them, but they just said a few words and left. They also said that if second miss is free, you can go to Duke Xing's mansion as a guest. Qin Yu had asked about what happened before, so she said slowly, "Miss, didn't Madam of Duke Xing's mansion say that she would come to apologize for what happened to first miss? Why did you come to second miss instead of first miss and Madam D?" Yu Jie, who had witnessed the whole thing, couldn't help but ask. Maybe he wants to inquire about something in a roundabout way. Qin Wanru smiled and said thoughtfully, "Spy. Listen to what? Pry into eldest Miss's affairs? Why does Madam of Duke Xing pay so much attention to first miss?" Yu Jie asked first, and then she immediately realized something in a panic. She widened her eyes and said, "Maybe she thinks something is wrong." Qin Wanru narrowed her eyes and looked at the hairpin in her hand. Her eyes turned cold. What misunderstanding? In the last life, they should have misunderstood something at the beginning, but in the end, it should not be a misunderstanding. Instead, they beat Qin Yuru at her own game and deliberately let others think so. Their real purpose was hidden in the fact that Qin Yuru was favored by old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion. In this life, she would reveal this in advance, take action before them, and lead them to misunderstand. She also took action from the misunderstanding, but she, who had grasped the first opportunity, turned the result around. At present, she still didn't understand the cause and effect. Madam of Duke Xing was testing her, and she was also testing Madam of Duke Xing. The reason why she didn't go to Qin Yuru and Madam D first was that Madam of Duke Xing misunderstood. It was all the trouble caused by the clothes embroidered with similar patterns. "Qin Yu, help me comb my hair. I want to go out." Qin Wanru put down the hairpin in her hand, walked to the dressing table and sat down. Go to Duke Xing's mansion? Although Qin Yu followed her, her eyes were full of surprise. "No, go to Br and Great Elder Princess's mansion. I promised Xiao Yuanhao that I would go to see him. I can't always break my promise." Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows slightly and said calmly, "Yes, I will help you comb your hair right now. Do you want to change your hairstyle or comb the previous bun?" Qin Yu agreed, put down the beautiful hair that Qin Wanru had tied before, and asked. In the past, Qin Wanru was young, and her hair had been tied up in an ordinary double-headed bun, with only 2 simple hairpins on top. But recently, Qin Wanru had grown taller, so she still looked a little ordinary with the simplest double-headed bun. Qin Yu had also learned the most popular double-headed bun in the capital city. She thought that with her Mrs. appearance, of course, she should dress up beautifully. "Let's just use the simplest one," Qin Wanru said carelessly. She reached out to choose a set of clothes from several sets of clothes brought by Yu Jie. "Just wear this one." His previous clothes couldn't be worn anymore. Now that he was making new clothes, in order to save time, he made some of the simplest designs. The embroidery was also very ordinary. If it wasn't for the fact that the material was good, it would be very inconspicuous. After washing up and changing clothes, Qin Wanru got on the carriage with Yu Jie, and the 2 gift boxes of Duke Xing's mansion were also taken into the carriage. She didn't understand some things very well, but R and Great Elder Princess must understand. Compared with Duke Xing's mansion, Qin Wanru liked and trusted R and Great Elder Princess more. The carriage stopped in the parking place of Great Elder Princess Mansion, and Qin Wanru got off the carriage. When she entered the gate, someone had already sent a message. Now there was already an old maid in charge guarding there. Seeing Qin Wanru get off the carriage, she hurriedly came over to salute, and then led the way in front. Qin Wanru followed them all the way to go inside in a roundabout way. When she arrived at the courtyard where and Great Elder Princess lived, she saw the door of the main room was opened, and a small figure rushed out before the main door. Yujia wanted to pull Qin Wanru away, but Qin Wanru waved her hand. The small figure had rushed in front of Qin Wanru, hugged Qin Wanru, and raised her head to look at Xiao Yuanhao's dark eyes. "Sister, why did you come to play with Hao so late? Hao has been waiting for a long time." Xiao Yuanhao said discontentedly. Qin Wanru reached out to touch Xiao Yuanhao's head and asked with a smile, "Hao, have you been well behaved recently?" "Of course, Hao has been well behaved, very well behaved. Sister, come in, come in." Xiao Yuanhao enthusiastically took Qin Wanru's hand and pulled her into the room. The curtain of the door had been raised high. Qin Wanru followed Xiao Yuanhao into the room and immediately saw a pair of malicious eyes. She couldn't help but be stunned. Why was Chu Luchen here? Different from when he was in Jiangzhou, Chu Luchen in the capital city almost always sat in a wheelchair when he went out. At this time, he was sitting there lazily with a handsome face, but a pair of beautiful eyes showed a bit of gloominess. At first glance, she knew that he seemed to be in a bad mood. She carefully withdrew her gaze and looked into the room. And Great Elder Princess was sitting on the chair with a smile on her face, looking at Qin Wanru kindly. Qin Wanru gently let go of Xiao Yuanhao's hand and went forward to bow to and Great Elder Princess. Then she carefully bowed to Chu Luchen. She didn't know who had provoked Prince Qin, and it seemed that he was not easy to get along with. In order to avoid being involved in the trouble, Qin Wanru thought it was better to stay away from Prince Qin. "Hao has been missing you, and he said that you promised to come to see him when you were in Duke Xing's mansion, but you didn't come. These days, he has been quarreling with me every day." After and Great Elder Princess invited Qin Wanru to sit down, she laughed. "Father's order has been given, and the mansion is very busy, so I can't get away for a while." Qin Wanru said modestly. And Great Elder Princess looked Qin Wanru up and down. She hadn't seen Qin Wanru for more than a month, but Qin Wanru had changed a lot. First of all, she was taller. Although she still looked childish, she vaguely looked like a little girl. Her delicate little face also looked more charming and beautiful. The beauty that had been ignored because she was too young gradually attracted people's attention. There were many beauties in the palace, but Qin Wanru was definitely one of the best when it came to the beauty of facial features. Moreover, her lips were bright red, which made her look more and more beautiful. Fortunately, she was still young and looked childish, so she was not particularly attractive. Chu Luchen, who was sitting on the side, didn't say anything, but raised his eyebrows. He hadn't seen this girl for a long time, and she had grown up. She was no longer as short as a 3-inch nail. This was really surprising. "Luchen, if you are not feeling well, go back early to have a rest. You still have to keep in mind what your Imperial grandmother asked me to tell you. After all, it's your health, and your Imperial grandmother will feel more at ease if someone takes care of you." And Great Elder Princess turned to Chu Luchen and said softly. She said gently. Chu Luchen lowered his head and said slowly, "Thank you, Grandaunt, but Speaking of this, he seemed to hesitate for a moment and then didn't say it. For a moment, the room was quiet, and Qin Wanru heard the sound of her breathing lightened. And Great Elder Princess thought that he would refuse as usual, so she tried to persuade him again and again. "You are so unreasonable. This is not only your Imperial grandmother's concern, but also your Imperial uncle's concern. They are always worried about your health. They have mentioned it to me again and again." And Great Elder Princess thought that he would refuse as usual, so she tried to persuade him earnestly. In fact, he had been trying to persuade Chu Luchen for a long time in the past few days. He refused to relent. If he didn't relent, no one dared to force him. They were afraid that he would hurt his body again. "Then send 2 palace maids over? I heard that the Empress has been preparing for a long time. As long as you agree, she will send the best person here." And Great Elder Princess said tentatively. Qin Wanru felt that she seemed to have heard something that she shouldn't have heard. She became more and more cautious. "I want to choose 2 good-looking ones who are pleasing to the eye." Chu Luchen raised his head. Although his face was pale without a trace of blood, he was still an incomparably handsome young man. His behavior was also elegant and noble. He glanced at Qin Wanru, who was standing obediently beside him, and his lips curved into a smile. He said casually, "Okay, okay, okay, I will go and tell your imperial grandmother later." Finally, he relented. Ru and Great Elder Princess thought that it was worthwhile to stare at him again and again these days. Ru and Great Elder Princess said, "Good," repeatedly with a sigh of relief. Finally, he didn't let her down. This kind of thing had to be done slowly. Now that he relented, the next thing would be much easier. Chapter 209. Grandaunt, please entertain the guests. I'm tired. Chu Luchen touched his head with his slender fingers and said slowly, "Then go and have a rest." Riv and Great Elder Princess stood up and was about to order someone to take Chu Luchen away. "Go down and rest." "Greataunt, I don't need to bother you. I'll go out by myself and wander around. If I'm tired, I'll rest there." He was very easy to talk to. Xiao Xuanzi hurriedly bowed to Ru and Great Elder Princess, and then glanced at Qin Wanru with a smile. Then he pushed Chu Luchen out. When they reached the door, the two old maids on both sides reached out and grabbed the wheel together. Xiao Xuanzi raised the back of the wheelchair, and the three of them lifted the wheelchair steadily. Then there was the sound of the wheels turning, and it slowly left. "Sit down." Ru and Great Elder Princess sat down and pointed to the chair beside her with a smile. Qin Wanru walked over and sat down. The servant girl hurriedly served tea and then left. Xiao Yuanhao looked at Qin Wanru and then at Ru and Great Elder Princess. After thinking for a while, he ran to the chair on the right side of Qin Wanru and sat down obediently. "How really likes you," Ryan said. The Great Elder Princess looked at them helplessly and smiled. These two children seemed to be fated. "I also like how Qin Wanru smiled and reached out to rub Xiao Yuanhao's soft hair. "Thank you again for what you did in Duke Xing's mansion," and Great Elder Princess said with her face darkening. What happened to Xiao Yuanhao had been reported to her by the people she sent. Of course, that person was also reprimanded by Ru and Great Elder Princess. Now Xiao Yuanhao had been replaced by another person, and he was led away as soon as he arrived at Duke Xing's mansion. What was the use of such a person? How is in Duke Xing's mansion? Qin Wanru thought about the wording and said, "It seems that Madame of Duke Xing likes Hao very much and is willing to give in to Hao in everything. If Hao has any problems, she will also bear all the responsibilities." Her words were very implicit. She doesn't even like Hao's biological mother. How could she like Hao? She is just a pretentious person. Ru and Great Elder Princess snorted. Infanta and Madame of Duke Xing didn't get along well in the past? Qin Wanru asked in surprise. On the surface, he seems respectful, but in reality, he has never liked my son. Ru and Great Elder Princess said, "You treat my son like this. How can you like Hao? I've already known what happened that day. Although I said I would apologize for Hao without hesitation, I just pushed the blame onto Hao. How could you bully such a young child? Hao is so young. Why did you do that to him?" And judging from the situation that day, it doesn't seem like it happened overnight. Qin Wanru was confused. What happened that day was still vivid in her mind. She had thought about it for a long time, but found that there was no result. She knew that Madame of Duke Xing was inappropriate, but why did she treat a child like this? The title of nobility in Duke Xing's mansion had nothing to do with Hao. Could it be that Madame of Duke Xing couldn't even tolerate a child without parents? Too ambitious. You actually want to control Hao? And Great Elder Princess said coldly, with a trace of hostility in the corner of her eyes. "If I know that what happened to Hao's parents is related to them, I will never let them go." It seemed that there should be something she didn't know. Qin Wanru was silent for a while. In fact, she didn't want to meddle in other people's business. She was busy with her own business, let alone others' business. Moreover, this kind of thing related to the royal family was not something that she, a weak girl, could meddle in. She reached out and touched the top of Xiao Yuanhao's head. This child looked very obedient. At this time, he just listened with a pair of big black eyes. And great elder princess seemed to feel that her words made Qin Wanru a little embarrassed, so she changed the topic. What kind of person is the first miss of your mansion? Why did she suddenly bump into Hao that day? Hao said that she took the initiative to bump into him and overturned his ink. Yes, she did it on purpose. As soon as this was mentioned, Xiao Yuanhao twisted in the chair unwillingly and said with a pair of big eyes angrily. He even pouted his pink little mouth. He looked angry and awkward. Both Qin Wanru and great elder princess laughed. Okay, I believe you. Sister, you are a good person. She is a bad person. Don't let her come next time. Xiao Yunhao was satisfied and his eyes were bright. Well, don't let her come to play. Qin Wanru comforted him with a smile. Then she turned her head and said to and great elder princess, although big sister is a little inappropriate in daily life, she would not want to offend you. Someone must have asked her to do so and they must have given her some benefits, or she thought it was a great benefit. Of course, she might not know Hao's identity at that time. Qin Wanru knew Qin Yuru's character very well. She dared not offend and great elder princess for no reason. However, if someone hinted something to her and she didn't know Xiao Yuanhao's real identity, she would probably do something. She would not forget that when she mentioned and great elder princess to Xiao Yuanhao, Qin Yuru's face turned pale. After that, she gritted her teeth and didn't change her words. Hinted? And great elder princess understood and her eyes became cold. She sneered and said, this child was born with a hard life. He lost his father at an early age and his posthumous child had a difficult birth. My son also died because of this. Duke Xing's mansion refused to let me take him away with the excuse that he was their bloodline. They also said in front of others that they would treat Hao well. After that, Hao didn't want to leave, so I let him stay in Duke Xing's mansion. I didn't expect that Duke Xing's mansion had planned it long ago. It's also my negligence. If there was someone who didn't want Xiao Yuanhao to live well and wanted others to think that Xiao Yuanhao was a naughty and ignorant child, there was no one else but Duke Xing's mansion. Qin Wanru saved Xiao Yuanhao before, so and great elder princess remembered the kindness of Qin's mansion. Then Qin Yuru deliberately bumped into Xiao Yuanhao and put all the blame on Xiao Yuanhao, a child. When great elder princess loved this child the most, so she might vent her anger on Qin Wanru. The person who plotted in the dark could be said to have grasped the most critical point in this matter. It could not only destroy Xiao Yuanhao's reputation, but also create a gap between Qin Wanru and great elder princess. It was really a good move. Qin Wanru never thought it was a malicious speculation about Duke Xing's mansion. In her last life, the tragedy after she entered the capital city could be said to have been driven by someone behind the scenes. Although she didn't know who it was, it must have something to do with Duke Xian's mansion. Great elder princess, do you know the reason? Because this matter was related to her, Qin Wanru asked one more question. Isn't it because of the title of nobility in his mansion? Does he really think that the title of nobility in Duke Xing's mansion can exist for thousands of years? And great elder princess snorted coldly and banged on the table heavily. For a title of nobility, he made all kinds of gestures. Now Hao is in my mansion. That day, I went to warn the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. If they heard any bad rumors about Hao again, don't blame me for being rude. Qin Wanru's watery eyes flashed a trace of sadness. No wonder after that day, there were almost no rumors about Xiao Yuanhao. It turned out that and great elder princess took action. Perhaps this was also the reason why Madame of Duke Xing had been quiet recently. Looking at the situation that day, Madame of Duke Xing had even thought of an excuse to visit Qin's mansion. Qin Yuru's clothes were left and the reason to visit Qin's mansion to express her gratitude. Either of these reasons could be used to visit Qin's mansion. However, Duke Xing's mansion didn't take any action. It seemed that it was just an excuse that day. But looking at the gift sent by Madame of Duke Xing today, she knew that it was not just an excuse. Today, Madame of Duke Xing sent me a gift. Qin Wanru came to the mansion to talk about this matter. She immediately fluttered her long eyelashes and said softly, "She sent you a gift?" And Great Elder Princess said in surprise, "Yes, today. She said that we hit it off and asked me to visit Duke Xing's mansion more often." Qin Wanru told the truth. And Great Elder Princess looked Qin Wanru up and down. She didn't see the reason why Madam of Duke Xing thought highly of Qin Wanru. Of course, she didn't believe that Madam of Duke Xing really liked Qin Wanru because of Xiao Yuanhao. What did she send? "A set of clothes and a set of jewelry," Qin Wanru said. "Have you brought them?" And Great Elder Princess asked. "Yes, they are in the carriage." "Yujie, go and get them," Qin Wanru ordered. And Great Elder Princess nodded and called an old maid over to accompany Yujie. When they came back, the gift box was placed on the table. After opening it, and Great Elder Princess was stunned when she saw the extremely exquisite set of clothes. "Colorful yarn? What is colorful yarn?" Qin Wanru asked. She had never heard of it. And Great Elder Princess reached out to pick up the cloth of the clothes and put it in her palm. The cloth slipped from her palm. And Great Elder Princess picked up the clothes again and walked to the window. She looked at the clothes in the sunlight in front of the window. Immediately, the clothes showed an extremely colorful color, as if they were illuminated. The color became brighter and brighter, and it even seemed that there were other colors in this color. But when she looked carefully, it was just this color. It is indeed colorful yarn. This is a very rare tribute. Even in the palace, it is very rare for the concubines in the palace to want such a set of clothes. Usually, they only use this colorful yarn to make some handkerchiefs. And Great Elder Princess took the clothes and sat in front of the bed again, looking at the clothes thoughtfully. Duke Xing's mansion was really generous. Chapter 210. Plus, the reason? Qin Wanru was shocked and couldn't help sitting up straight. Although he had long guessed that it was not simple, he did not expect that there would be such a hidden disaster. The Emperor doesn't like it. Ruian Great Elder Princess did not hesitate this time. She looked at the hanging curtain and said in a low voice. Her words were concise. This answer was out of Qin Wanru's expectation. She had thought of many possibilities, but none of them matched with this answer. It turned out that the Emperor didn't like it. As the Emperor of a country, he should be high and mighty and usually pay attention to national affairs. How could he pay so much attention to this kind of thing about women's clothes? What about this set of jewelry? After the shock, Qin Wanru did not ask again, but pointed to another gift box and said, "Since Ruian Great Elder Princess didn't say it just now, there must be a reason." The secrets of the royal family had never been something that others could casually inquire about. There shouldn't be many people who knew about this matter related to the Emperor, or even if they knew, they wouldn't dare to say it. Seeing that Qin Wanru was sensible enough to stop asking, and Great Elder Princess showed a trace of appreciation in her eyes. This child was indeed smart, and she knew when to advance and retreat, and knew how to make choices. Putting down the clothes in his hands, he picked up the accessories and looked at them. "This is nothing. You don't need to wear clothes." Knowing that and Great Elder Princess was reminding her, Qin Wanru nodded hurriedly. Elder sister, how has something nice to look at. Elder sister will accompany how to see it." Xiao Yuanhao, who had been sitting behind them, couldn't stand it anymore. He reached out to pull Qin Wanru's sleeves and looked at and Great Elder Princess eagerly. "Grandma, I want my sister to play with me." Seeing him twisting his small body like a rubber band, Ruian Great Elder Princess and Qin Wanru both laughed. "Well, go and play for a while. Don't get too tired." And Great Elder Princess ordered with a smile. "Okay, how will be obedient. How will be obedient." Hearing that and Great Elder Princess agreed, Xiao Yuanhao hurriedly jumped down from the chair, pulled Qin Wanru's sleeves and walked out. Qin Wanru stood up helplessly. After bowing to and Great Elder Princess, she left with Xiao Yuanhao. "Sister, let's go. Let's hurry up." As soon as they left the sight of and Great Elder Princess, Xiao Yuanhao became more lively. He held Qin Wanru's hand and led the way. After passing through a few winding corridors, they arrived at a garden. Sister, look, the flowers are blooming. Isn't it beautiful? Pointing at a plum tree by the door, Xiao Yuanhao said proudly. The plum tree was vigorous and the red plum blossoms on its branches were blooming. It was only the beginning of winter, yet there were actually such beautiful plum blossoms to look at. It was truly surprising. So early? Qin Wanru held Xiao Yuanhao's hand and asked in astonishment. Yes, it's early at my maternal grandmother's place. Even my maternal grandmother's place doesn't open this early. I discovered it before, and I'm waiting for my sister to come. I'm sure my sister will like it. Xiao Yuanhao's little face was white and tender, and he pretended to be an adult at this moment. Only his black and white eyes showed a little bit of complacency, and he looked at Qin Wanru with a look of asking for praise. Qin Wanru smiled and reached out to rub the top of his head. No wonder Chu Luchen liked to touch her hair before. It was really comfortable to touch her soft hair. Big sister likes it very much. How, you're so nice. You know I like it. Big sister, there are more inside. Let me take you in. Xiao Yuanhao was so happy that he almost jumped up when he was praised by Qin Wanru. Immediately, the serious look on his face fell apart, and he pulled Qin Wanru to the garden. The yard was full of plum blossoms. Some had bloomed and some had not. They were scattered in a picturesque way, and they could be clearly distinguished. One was red, and the other was white. Along the winding path, a pavilion appeared in front of them, and there was a man in the pavilion with his back to them. Seeing his back, Qin Wanru sighed helplessly. Chu Luchen, it was the clothes that Chu Luchen was wearing just now. She would not misplace it. Big sister, Prince Qin is here. Xiao Yuanhao stopped and said in a low voice. Seeing Xiao Yuanhao's look, Qin Wanru couldn't help laughing. It was the first time that she saw a timid expression on this child's face. This child had always been fearless, but he was also afraid of Chu Luchen. What's wrong? How, are you afraid of Prince Qin? Qin Wanru said in a low voice. She looked around and didn't know where Xiao Xuanzi was. He was not here. Yes, How is afraid of Prince Qin. Xiao Yuanhao nodded with a tight face and reached out to pull Qin Wanru to step back. Why are you afraid of Prince Qin? Qin Wanru was interested, and she asked in a low voice with a smile. Prince Qin wants me to study, and he wants to hit my palm. It hurts. Xiao Yuanhao looked aggrieved and pulled Qin Wanru's hand hard. He was really afraid of Prince Qin. In the past, he was used to be the king in Duke Xing's mansion, and everyone gave in to him. Moreover, he was tempted not to study. After he came to and Great Elder Princess's mansion, and Great Elder Princess invited him to be a teacher. Unexpectedly, he was so naughty that he ran out to play every day instead of practicing calligraphy. His teacher had no choice but to complain to and Great Elder Princess. Then and Great Elder Princess called him back and sent him to the study. However, Xiao Yuanhao couldn't sit still. That day, Xiao Yuanhao sneaked out of the study and met Chu Luchen. He was caught by Chu Luchen's guards and hung directly on the tree. In the beginning, Xiao Yuanhao was stubborn. However, when no one came to save him, he was so anxious that he burst into tears. Later, when Chu Luchen put him down, he ran to the study. When he saw Chu Luchen again, he didn't dare to be presumptuous, for fear that he would annoy Prince Qin again. After all, if he annoyed Prince Qin, even his grandmother couldn't do anything. Come here. A leisurely voice came from the front, and the two people who were in a commotion were shocked. Xiao Yuanhao looked up at Qin Wanru pitifully and lowered his voice. Sister, let's run. Still want to run? Do you want to stay on the tree for a while? A gentle voice came with a smile. Xiao Yuanhao hurriedly hid behind Qin Wanru's hand and buried his head in her back in panic. At that time, Prince Qin had asked the guards to hang her on the tree with such a gentle voice, no matter how much she cried and made a fuss. Feeling the child's fear, Qin Wanru felt helpless. She held Xiao Yuanhao's hand and pulled him over, and then walked slowly to the pavilion. In the pavilion, the wheelchair had turned. Chu Luchen leaned against the railing of the chair and supported his head with one hand. His posture was leisurely, with a delicate face and a gentle look. There was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth, and his gaze slowly fell from Qin Wanru to Xiao Yunhao. Qin Wanru sensed that Xiao Yunhao's little body trembled a little, and he tightly leaned against her. How, don't you want to study? Chu Luchen asked gently. Yes, I want to study. Xiao Yunhao's little body trembled again, and he immediately stood up and said loudly. His grandmother said that Prince Chen liked children who were willing to study the most, and he couldn't let Prince Chen know that he didn't like to study. Do you want to read this book? Chu Luchen raised a book in his other hand and asked with a smile. Xiao Yunhao took a step back and looked nervous. I'm still young, and I haven't learned many words. When I learn more in the future, I can read this kind of book. His grandmother said that if he didn't know how to read the book given by Prince Chen, he would be beaten. How, are you going to study now, or my book? Chu Luchen said with a lazy smile. I'm going to study now, and my teacher is still waiting for me. Xiao Yunhao felt that he couldn't stay at this time, so he looked at Qin Wanru with a humble look and pulled her hand. When Qin Wanru slightly squatted down, he said in a low voice, Sister, I'm going to study now, and you can ask someone to come to the study to find me. After saying this, he looked at Chu Luchen carefully, let go of Qin Wanru's hand, and ran out quickly. An old maid followed him closely and said anxiously, Master Hao, be careful and run slowly or you'll fall. The voice gradually faded away, and finally, Qin Wanru was left standing at the entrance of the pavilion with a stunned look. Chu Luchen laughed in a low voice at first, and then he laughed out loud. He even took the book in his hand and patted the armrest of his chair hard, as if the treasured book was about to fall apart. Your Highness, Hao is just a child. Qin Wanru was very helpless, and reminded Chu Luchen helplessly, who had lost his usual elegance and decency. Scaring a child gave him such a sense of accomplishment, and she didn't know what he was thinking. Chu Luchen's laughter suddenly stopped, and he covered his chest and coughed loudly. Qin Wanru hurriedly took 2 steps forward, and reached out to pat his back a few times. Finally, Chu Luchen stopped coughing, and his pale face became flushed because of coughing, showing an unhealthy weakness, but because of this flush his delicate face became more and more beautiful. He raised a pair of eyes that were coughing out water vapor, looked at Qin Wanru, and his face suddenly became gloomy. He reached out to push away Qin Wanru's hand, and his face was indifferent, and his eyes were unusually shimmering. Do you think that I'm dying? Your Highness, Qin Wanru, if I die, what do you think will happen? Chu Luchen suddenly laughed again. Qin Wanru took a step back and kept a distance from him. This was the temperamental Prince Chen. I don't know. Will someone avenge this king? Chu Luchen asked with interest, as if the gloominess at that moment was just Qin Wanru's own mistake. Your Highness, of course you will live a long life. Qin Wanru didn't understand what he meant and answered carefully. Live a long life? Chu Luchen seemed to have heard a big joke. His thin lips curled up slightly, revealing a mocking smile. The sickly handsome young man looked a little decadent. Others may be able to live to 100 years old, but I can't. If others can, so can you. Qin Wanru didn't understand what he meant, and she blinked her eyes and asked confusedly. This king's body can actually live as long as others? Qin Wanru, you're really good at flattering. Chu Luchen smiled, and it seemed that he was in a good mood, but Qin Wanru saw that his smile did not reach the bottom of his eyes, and it was not like the unscrupulous smile just now, and she couldn't help but feel cold. Chapter 211. She inexplicably felt that Chu Luchen was very dangerous at this time. She looked back carefully, only to see Yu Jie standing outside the pavilion with her head down, and Xiao Xuanzi was still nowhere to be seen. In the past, Xiao Xuanzi followed Chu Luchen closely. When did he leave for so long and not come back? Your Highness, where is Xiao Xuanzi? Qin Wanru composed herself, blinked her eyes and asked. Qin Wanru, do you think I can still marry a wife? Chu Luchen ignored her question and asked leisurely. He supported his head with his hand, glanced sideways at Qin Wanru, and raised his eyebrows ambiguously. Prince can marry her. Qin Wanru didn't understand what he meant and answered carefully. Don't you feel that you are delaying her? Chu Liuchen's dark eyes were unclear. If your highness wants to recuperate, you naturally won't hold others back. Qin Wanru thought for a while and said, when she died in the last life, Prince Chen seemed to be fine and didn't use a wheelchair. His complexion seemed to be better than now. He should be much better, right? Since he could recover in his previous life, he could recover in his current life as well. In Qin Wanru's opinion, the biggest reason for Chu Liuchen's behavior should be his mental illness. When they were in Jiangzhou, he once stubbornly refused to take medicine. Judging from Xiao Xuanzi's words at that time, it should not be a matter of a day or two. As long as Prince takes the medicine and sees a doctor well, your body will naturally get better. Qin Wanru added helplessly, will it be as good as your face? Chu Liuchen's voice was gentle, but there was an unfathomable coldness and ruthlessness in it. He glanced at Qin Wanru's face, which was pink and white, which was completely different from his pale color. Her red lips were even more enviable. They were not only bright but also beautiful. Qin Wanru groaned inwardly. It sounded like he was throwing a tantrum, and she happened to run into the muzzle. Of course. Qin Wanru could only answer, what if I can't? Chu Liuchen asked seriously. It's always possible to raise it slowly. Qin Wanru bit her lips and didn't know how to answer him. He was going to kill her with his words. Qin Wanru, I heard that you learned medicine in Jiangzhou. How about treating me? I'll just make you look like this. Chu Liuchen's expression became more and more gentle. He raised his handsome eyes, which were shimmering and harmless. No one could imagine that the sharp words just now came from his mouth. Prince Chen was not only temperamental, but also covered up his behavior with beautiful and enchanting colors. It was really hard to guess what he wanted to do. Your Highness, I just started studying medicine. Qin Wanru said eagerly. Of course, she would not ask how Chu Liuchen knew about her. Even if others did not know, it was impossible to hide it from him. In his previous life, he was able to regain his position as the crown prince and suppress the other princes of the emperor. This showed that he was not as harmless as he looked on the surface. Beautiful things are poisonous. Especially this kind of extremely beautiful color, it was even more poisonous. How about I ask Imperial grandmother to let you into the manner to treat me? Chu Liuchen said slowly. His voice was so gentle that it was almost pure, as if he didn't know that it was not polite at all. Prince. Qin Wanru's voice rose unconsciously, and her bright watery eyes widened in shock. Why not? Just now, who said that he would help me live a long life, marry a wife and have children, and let me have the same bright color as you? Chu Liuchen's face darkened, and his handsome eyebrows were raised high. His handsome face showed a bit of coldness, which was chilling to the bones. Qin Wanru was so shocked that she could hardly believe her ears. Was that what she was trying to say? But at this time, if she said that she did not mean it, she must be doomed according to Prince Chen's meaning. Chu Liuchen gritted his teeth. He was really too difficult to deal with. Your Highness, since you know that I study medicine, you should know that I haven't learned it for a long time, and you should also know from whom I learned it, right? Qin Wanru said thoughtfully. Not long, from Mingqiu nun of Jingxin Monastery. Chu Liuchen's answer was within Qin Wanru's expectation. How dare I treat your illness in such a short time? If you really need treatment, Mingqiu nun's medical skills are very good. Qin Wanru's words were very smooth. On the one hand, she avoided it, but on the other hand, she did not completely avoid it. It seemed that what she said was also sincere. Mingqiu nun? You want to recommend her to help Jingxin Monastery? Chu Liuchen looked at her ambiguously and suddenly laughed in a low voice. Qin Wanru was shocked. Her long eyelashes fluttered twice. She stared at Chu Liuchen closely, and her forehead began to sweat. Did something happen in Jingxin Monastery? Did something happen? This king does not know. Chu Liuchen leaned back and turned his wheelchair leisurely. Then he looked at the beautiful red plum tree beside the pavilion. The flowers were bright and enchanting. Qin Wanru hurriedly turned to him and said, Prince, please help me. Is it related to me? Chu Liuchen raised his eyebrows. Didn't Jingxin Monastery master give you a few stalks of fragrance of July? Wasn't this the fate between Jingxin Monastery and Prince Chen? Is the Empress Dowager well? Qin Wanru forced herself to calm down, anxiously said. She couldn't remember when Jingxin Monastery had an accident in her last life, but it didn't seem to be this time. So she didn't care about it at first. But Chu Liuchen's words would not be without a target. She was in the inner court of Qin's mansion, so she was not well informed. But Chu Liuchen was different. His information network should not only be in the capital city. What benefits can I get? Chu Liuchen looked at her and suddenly smiled quietly. Mingqiu Nun's medical skills are the best. If Mingqiu Nun can take care of your body, you will definitely recover. Qin Wanru bowed deeply and respectfully and said, "Please help me, Prince." There are many people with excellent Chinese medicine skills in the capital city, aren't there? Chu Liuchen was not moved and said, "At your command, Prince." Qin Wanru gritted her teeth and said sensibly. Anyway, she owed Chu Liuchen a lot. If they really talked about it, she could only listen to his command. Besides, this matter was not a big deal. Too much debt to worry about, that was probably her. You said it, Qin Wanru. You can't go back on your word like you did just now. Chu Liuchen was quite complacent in his words. Yes, it is what I said. Qin Wanru repeated helplessly. The glass cup. Chu Liuchen suddenly said. Qin Wanru's eyes suddenly widened. She understood and said, Fenghua glass cup? People from Duke Yong's mansion? Good, you're smart. Chu Liuchen felt satisfied and nodded slightly. For Fenghua glass cup, they actually want to deal with Jingxin Monastery? Qin Wanru's pink face showed anger, and she tightly rubbed the handkerchief in her hand. It turned out that Madame D did this for Fenghua glass cup. Grandma must have said that the Fenghua glazed cup was still in Jiangzhou, so she asked Duke Yong's mansion to send people to Jiangzhou to get it. Since she had given the Fenghua glazed cup to Chu Liuchen, how could it still be in Jingxin Monastery in Jiangzhou? The people sent by Duke Yong's mansion must not believe it. She didn't know what kind of scheme they had used to attack Jingxin Monastery. Madame D and Duke Yong's mansion were so hateful. For their own interests, they disregarded other people's lives and involved the whole Jingxin Monastery. They actually treated people's lives like grass. What does that Fenghua glass cup have to do with her? Qin Wanru said with hatred. There were such people in the world. They were not only extremely vicious, but also took others' things for granted. They even did things that angered both human beings and gods in order to take others' things as their own. In the past, she didn't understand why Madame D and Qin Yuru treated her like this. Now she felt that there was no need to think about it at all. Some people were so vicious and cold by nature. When I went to Jiangzhou, it was and Great Elder Princess who asked me to find the glass cup. I didn't know if I didn't look for it, but when I looked for it, I was shocked. I found more than a dozen glass cups for and Great Elder Princess. Chu Liuchen said casually, Your one is with me, and I threw the rest to and Great Elder Princess. So, there was no answer to this matter. She didn't know why Madame D liked it so much. It seemed that she couldn't find out anything from Chu Liuchen. Can you save them? After thinking about it, the most important thing now was to save people. Yes. Chu Liuchen nodded slightly. Prince, please help them. Qin Wanru was overjoyed and bowed to Chu Liuchen respectfully. Qin Wanru, I'm sick. Chu Liuchen stretched out his hand in front of Qin Wanru and raised his eyebrows to look at her. Qin Wanru had no choice but to reach out her hand to check his pulse carefully. Then she frowned and raised her head. Prince, you need to take good care of your body. Apart from these, she actually didn't know what to say. It was certain that Chu Liuchen was not in good health. She had taken his pulse before and found that he was not well. He also had some fetal poison that was the most difficult to cure. The fetal poison from the mother's body was the most difficult to cure. This was the main cause of his illness. But even if she knew that she couldn't cure the main cause, can Mingqiu Nun cure it? Chu Liuchen raised his eyebrows and said lightly, but his eyes were deep. Yes, Mingqiu Nun can cure it. Qin Wanru said sensibly. This was an opportunity and an excuse. With Chu Liuchen's identity, he certainly couldn't directly deal with this kind of thing, and he even shouldn't know it. I'll mention the abbess of Jingxin Monastery who can cure diseases and Mingqiu Nun to Imperial grandmother. Chu Luchen was rarely easy to talk to. His eyes fell on Qin Wanru's hand that had not been released until now. His pale lips slightly raised, and it seemed that he was in a good mood. Qin Wanru was stunned and looked down. Then she found that she still held his hand tightly after feeling his pulse. She blushed and immediately put down her hand. She coughed in a low voice and was about to say something to make the scene less embarrassing. Suddenly her hand was held by Chu Luchen. He pointed to the path on the right outside the pavilion and said, "Someone is coming, push me there." Although Qin Wanru didn't hear anything, she still pushed his wheelchair as he said. He went out and pushed onto the narrow path behind the tall pines. Chapter 212. Prince Yu, this way please. Qin Wanru blinked her eyes and looked at Chu Luchen. It was Xiao Xuanzi's voice. Where is he? At the intersection where they came before, 3 people appeared. One was Xiao Xuanzi, the other was Prince Yu, Chu Luiyue, and a little eunuch, who should be Chu Luiyue's personal eunuch. Hey, our master was here just now. Where is he now? Xiao Xuanzi was also stunned. He looked around and found no one, and his face turned pale. Where is he going, third brother? Chu Luiyue didn't panic. He just glanced around coldly and found nothing, so he asked slowly. I really don't know. I heard that your Highness Prince Yu is coming, so my master asked me to pick you up. I really don't know where he is going. Your Highness Prince Yu, please wait a moment. I will ask someone from Great Princess Royal Mansion. Xiao Xuanzi said anxiously. Chu Luiyue waved his hand, and Xiao Xuanzi hurriedly left. Chu Luiyue walked into the pavilion, walked around leisurely with his hands clasped behind his back, stood there casually, and began to appreciate the plum blossoms in front of him. For a long time, there was no sound in the pavilion. Your Highness, is Prince Chen not here? Do you want to go to other places to have a look? The little eunuch following Chu Luiyue couldn't help but ask. It doesn't matter. Just wait. Chu Luiyue said calmly. Your Highness, is it that Prince Chen left you here alone like last time? The little eunuch felt unfair for his master and said, it was the same last time. He said he would wait for you here, but he left early in the end, leaving you waiting here with an empty stomach. The little eunuch said discontentedly. It was obvious that his master was most likely to inherit the throne in the future. Why did he treat Prince Chen, who was dying of illness, so well? He was originally a crown prince who had been abolished, and it was impossible for him to have a chance to take back the throne. Even if he recovered, it was useless. What's more, he was so ill that he might die at any time. Do you think I am at a loss? Chu Luiyue suddenly smiled. Yes, I feel sorry for you. The little eunuch hurriedly showed his loyalty. Others will also feel that this king has suffered a loss. Chu Luiyue didn't say anything, but he was very satisfied. The smile on his face didn't disappear. It was rare to see a cold-faced prince like him in such a situation. It could be seen that he was really happy and didn't feel sad because Chu Luchen deliberately didn't want to see him. Qin Wanru's eyes fell on Chu Liuchen's face. These trees were very dense. If 2 people and a wheelchair were hidden behind them, no one would find them. Chu Luchen closed his eyes slightly and leaned against the wide wheelchair behind him. The sunlight fell through the shadows of the trees and mottled fell on his face. His jade-like face was transparent. His long eyelashes curled up and rested on his handsome and delicate facial features, making him look like a gentleman walking out of a painting. Even though his lips were so pale, it didn't affect his appearance in the slightest. Such a person should be living in a picturesque environment. Qin Wanru inexplicably bit her cherry lips, giving birth to a few sighs and inexplicable feelings. Chu Luiyue's words had been very clear. The reason why he was so accommodating to Chu Luchen was that he deliberately did it to show others. The more Chu Luchen made it difficult for him, the more others would think of him. Chu Luchen was just a tool for him to fish for fame. Perhaps he was not only fishing for fame, but also wanted to please the Empress Dowager. It was said that the Empress Dowager liked the sick and weak Chu Luchen most. However, no one would have thought that he would be the one to obtain that position in the end. Not to mention his identity as the dethroned crown prince. With his current identity, no one would regard him as a formidable opponent. But even so, the emperor would certainly not let him go. If someone used his identity, they could still stir up a big mess. Such a person could not be caught or let go, but Chu Luiwei dared to use him. Prince, you can make friends with other princes, but Prince Qin is always, the emperor may not like him. The little eunuch was Chu Luiwei's confidant, so he dared to say something, especially when there was no one around and his prince was obviously in a good mood. Father doesn't like him? Chu Luiwei said calmly. Seeing that he was so calm, the little eunuch became bolder and immediately plucked up his courage to say, Prince, the emperor will definitely not like Prince Chen's identity. If you get close to Prince Chen, the emperor... Before he finished his words, the little eunuch did not dare to say too much. But the meaning of his words had been understood. Chu Luiwei chuckled in a low voice and was in a very good mood. Father won't really do anything to him. Anyway, he is dying. It's good enough for him to live for 1 or 2 years. Does he really want to live forever? Given his condition, he will die even if father doesn't do anything to him. He said this with great certainty. The little eunuch suddenly raised his head, and his face immediately turned pale. Although he was a confidant, he did not want to know some things. If he knew too much, he would die quickly. This was a fact that many people in the palace knew. Perhaps the little eunuch's shock disturbed Chu Luiwei. He finally turned his head, glanced at the little eunuch calmly, and raised the corner of his mouth. Don't worry, I won't do anything to you. You're this king's confidant. Could it be that this king has other confidants that are important to you? Thank you, Prince. The little eunuch knelt down with a plop and heavily kowtowed 3 times. His face became slightly better. Chu Luiwei raised his hand and motioned him to get up. Then he turned around and walked out of the pavilion. The little eunuch hurriedly got up and followed him. He hesitated and said, Prince, are you not going to wait for Prince Qin? No, I've come to look for him. It doesn't matter whether I can find him or not. It doesn't matter as long as Imperial grandmother and father can see him. Chu Luiwei said casually. The little eunuch did not dare to answer casually and hurriedly followed him. They walked out of the plum blossom forest one after another. The pavilion became quiet again. Qin Wanru looked at Chu Liuchen's handsome face. With his eyes still closed, he looked completely harmless. Even if he didn't do anything and just leaned against the pavilion quietly, he had a natural elegance and nobility, which made him look more noble than the characters in the ordinary ink paintings. Prince, Qin Wanru whispered when she saw that he did not speak. What's the matter? Chu Luchen asked without opening his eyes. Prince Yu has left. Although she did not think that it was impossible for Chu Luchen not to hear it, Qin Wanru still said this. So what if he came? So what if he left? His leisurely voice was a little cold and dignified. Qin Wanru could not help but feel shocked. She did not know what others thought of him, but at least in her eyes, Chu Luchen would never be simple. Such a character, even if he was sick and weak, could also control the weather. How could he be really innocent and harmless? If so many people really thought so, it could only be that Chu Liuchen's expression was too deceptive. Qin Wanru found that he knew what kind of expression to show at any time. It was far beyond the moodiness. How many people in this world could control their moods and make others think that they were truly temperamental and that they were just being willful? Capricious moodiness, extremely sick and weak, coupled with his occasional innocence, who would regard him as a strong enemy. It seemed that except for being sick and weak, everything else was secretly controlled by him. Inexplicably thinking of something, she could not help but feel shocked, and the hand that was pushing the wheelchair unconsciously moved. What's wrong? Do you feel sorry for me? Chu Liuchen's eyes opened at some time and fell on Qin Wanru coldly, as if an extremely sharp and light sword cut through this empty place. There was a kind of coldness that made people feel creepy. Qin Wanru looked down and met Chu Liuchen's eyes. She did not avoid his eyes and said, Your Highness is not pitiful, but Prince Yu is pitiful. After saying this, she felt even more scared. This kind of feeling should be the same as Chu Liuwei's little eunuch just now. She did not want to say it, but if she did not say it, she would inevitably be pushed to the position of Chu Liuchen's confidant. If not, there was only a dead end. In fact, she did not want to take this road, but after hearing Chu Liuyue's words just now, she knew that she could not escape. Chu Luchen would not let her go. Just like that little eunuch, if he did not become Chu Liuyue's most confidant, he would only die. He knew too many secrets, so what if he did not die? But what puzzled her was that her position was not the same as that of the little eunuch. Why did Chu Luchen recruit her as his confidant, and what did he want her to do? She felt cold in her hands and feet, but did not show it on her face. Her eyes were calm and firm. She was a person who had died once, so how could she be frightened by this step that had to be taken? No matter what, she had to go down this road step by step. Oh, why do you say that? Chu Luchen smiled and slightly raised the corner of his mouth. He liked to see Qin Wanru tell the truth. Honesty was the minimum requirement, wasn't it? Especially for a person like her. Prince, you thought that he could make use of your highness, but in fact, your highness is also making use of him. Qin Wanru's voice was very light, so light that she almost could not hear it clearly. She bit her lips, and her lips turned red. She actually felt very calm, so calm that even she was surprised. How could she think that this was originally normal? Perhaps she had already thought of this possibility when she made a deal with Chu Luchen, and everything at the moment was just a matter of course. Chu Luchen was not a person who was easy to get along with. When in Jiangzhou, he seemed to have been giving and not asking too much from her. But now he seemed to be asking for something from her, right? Chapter 213. Then how do you think we should deal with him? Chu Luchen said lazily, his eyes falling on Qin Wanru's face. Qin Wanru closed her eyes to hide the trace of serenity in her eyes. She opened her eyes again and looked at Chu Luchen quietly. She said bluntly, "Prince, I don't know. I'm just a weak girl, I don't know many things." Chu Luchen stopped talking. He tilted his head slightly and seemed to be looking her up and down. Qin Wanru didn't say anything. She pursed her lips stubbornly and looked straight at the handsome and harmless face in front of her. He was so gentle and aloof. Who could think of his black-bellied and powerful strength? Qin Wanru, do you know what you just said? Chu Luchen suddenly laughed and touched his chin playfully. I know. Qin Wanru nodded without hesitation. Perhaps she had already known this a long time ago. Chu Luchen looked at her this time and suddenly said meaningfully, "Good, this is very good." Qin Wanru blinked her watery eyes, and Chu Liuchen's figure could be seen in her clear eyes. I will deal with the Jingxin monastery master. This was Chu Liuchen's affirmation to her. She felt relieved. Even if she had given Fragrance of July to Chu Luchen before, she didn't know whether he could repay her with this favor. But now Qin Wanru felt relieved. The appearance of Xiao Xuanzi helped Qin Wanru out of trouble. After bowing to Chu Luchen, Qin Wanru turned around and left. Seeing Qin Wanru leaving in a hurry, Chu Luchen withdrew his gaze and looked down thoughtfully. His long eyelashes fell like a tired butterfly, very beautiful, but also very relaxed. Master, Prince Yu has gone back. Will the Empress Dowager think you are unreasonable? Xiao Xuanzi reported. It was rare that his master was in a good mood and relaxed. He was still very willing to see it. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but look at the place where Qin Wanru disappeared. Chu Liyue thinks that no one can understand his mind. There are many smart people in the world. Chu Luchen said lightly. His extremely long eyelashes cast a strange shadow on his white, almost transparent face. But when he raised his eyes, he looked gentle, as if he was looking at a completely different scene from what he saw just now. That extremely handsome face seemed to know when to use the right expression to control the hearts of others. He was smiling. Xiao Xuanzi, who had been with him for a long time, could sense that his smile did not reach his eyes. It was a completely different feeling from the relaxation just now. Master, if second Miss Qin didn't say that, you would? Xiao Xuanzi stammered. He didn't know if it was because Chu Liuchen's face was too relaxed just now, or it was because he saw Chu Liuchen's sudden defense that made him laugh too hard. In fact, he had been here for a while. He had walked through the hidden place on this road with his master, So he heard the conversation between Chu Luchen and Qin Wanru. Since it has fallen into my hands, it belongs to this king. No one can take it away from me. Chu Luchen stretched out a slender hand. His skin was also pale. Looking at his palm, he slightly raised the corner of his mouth and said with a faint smile. The inexplicable chill made Xiao Xuanzi shiver involuntarily, and the next words almost came out of his mouth. If second Miss Qin didn't say so just now, you wouldn't have dealt with her? After saying this, Xiao Xuanzi immediately understood and knelt down abruptly. Master, please forgive me for speaking recklessly. Since she has appeared, she doesn't have to go. Chu Luchen ignored Xiao Xuanzi, and his eyes fell on his palm softened. There are not so many ifs in this world. If she belongs to me, she can't escape. Chu Luchen's voice was also almost gentle. After a long time, he raised his head and slightly raised his hand, motioning Xiao Xuanzi to stand up. Xiao Xuanzi stood up numbly and looked at Chu Luchen in a daze. A trace of tears flashed in the corner of his eyes. He might be happy for his master, but was it really okay for him to be so stubborn? Perhaps second Miss Qin could be the sunshine in his master's heart and pull him out of the eternal darkness. After Qin Wanru left Chu Luchen, she went to find Xiao Yuanhao. Xiao Yuanhao was practicing calligraphy in the study. When he saw Qin Wanru, he stopped practicing and pushed the paper in his hand away and ran out. Sister, has Prince Chen left? Xiao Yuanhao looked behind Qin Wanru and was relieved when he didn't find Chu Luchen. Qin Wanru couldn't help laughing. This child was not afraid of anything. She didn't know why he was so afraid of Chu Luchen. Everything had its vanquisher. Prince Chen is not here. I came to tell Hao that I'm going back. Sister, don't go. I haven't played with Hao yet. Xiao Yunhao was reluctant, twisting his little body and pouting his little mouth. How many words have you written? Qin Wanru blinked her watery eyes and smiled leisurely. Hao told me before that when you grow up, you want to be like your father and finish writing the screen wall. It was left to me by your father. Xiao Yuanhao couldn't say anything. He lowered his head and stamped on the ground twice to show his dissatisfaction. When Hao writes 100 pieces of paper, I will come to play with Hao. At that time, even if Prince Chen is here, he will not say anything. Qin Wanru touched his head and smiled. Really? Prince Chen will not care about Hao's business? Hearing that Chu Luchen would not care about him, Xiao Yuanhao's eyes lit up. He raised his head and looked at Qin Wanru with a look that he wanted to get a positive answer from her. Yes, Hao has been studying hard. Prince Chen will certainly not say anything. Even if he sees Hao playing with me, he will not do anything. Qin Wanru coaxed him. But Xiao Yuanhao hesitated and said helplessly. Thinking of Prince Chen's face, he couldn't help shivering. He was really afraid of seeing Chu Luchen. Last time when he was hung up, he cried and complained to his maternal grandma, but his maternal grandma ignored him. Later, when he returned to Duke Xing's mansion, he also took the opportunity to complain to his grandmother. However, his grandmother and second aunt, who always defended him, said that they could not control Prince Chen's business and asked him not to provoke Prince Chen. Xiao Yuanhao, who couldn't complain, immediately became obedient and didn't dare to make trouble in front of Chu Luchen. If there was someone he was most afraid of now, it would be Chu Luchen. There was no one else but him. After talking with Xiao Yuanhao for a while, Qin Wanru went back with Yu Jie to say goodbye to Ru and Great Elder Princess. Ru and Great Elder Princess gave her some cloth, which was not only for her, and asked her to distribute it to others in the mansion. After thanking Ru and Great Elder Princess, Qin Wanru went out with Yu Jie and got on her carriage. The carriage turned all the way out of the gate of Great Elder Princess's mansion and went to Qin's mansion. When they arrived at the mansion, the carriage stopped. Qin Wanru asked 2 servant girls to take the gifts and went to see Madame Dowager first. Coincidentally, Qin Yuru and Dian were also there. Since they got engaged in a hurry, they almost always went together when they came to the inner courtyard. They looked very harmonious and seemed to have forgotten what happened to Ning Kaixian before. After Qin Wanru went forward and bowed to Madame Dowager, she asked the servant girl to put the gifts on the table. The bolts of brocade were so beautiful that they dazzled everyone's eyes. Grandma, these are the gifts that and great elder princess asked me to send to you, Qin Wanru said with a smile. Qin Yuru stepped forward first, reached out to pick up a piece of brocade, and gently stroked the embroidered brocade. At first glance, she knew it was a good thing. Even in Duke Yong's mansion, it was hard for her to see such a gorgeous material, but now there were several bolts piled up here. And great elder princess must have given them to you. Since she has given them to you, you can take them. Most of them are for young girls. How can I use such young materials at my old age? Madame Dowager said with a smile as if she didn't see the greed in Qin Yuru's eyes. Grandma, they are really sent by Ru and great elder princess, but some of them are for you. Grandma, just accept them. Qin Wanru said with a smile. Then you can choose first. Take as many as you like. Anyway, it is Ru and great elder princess who originally thanked you. Madame Dowager was clear about the matter and certainly knew the reason why Ru and great elder princess expressed her gratitude. She immediately said to Qin Wanru with a smile. Grandma, since it is Ru and great elder princess kindness, how can I refuse? If great elder princess knows it, she will think that you don't like her gifts. At that time, it will not be good to make Ru and great elder princess angry. Let me help you pick some suitable ones first. Qin Yuru rolled her eyes and continued Madame Dowager's words. She had picked a few that she liked just now and pulled them all to her hand. Grandma, do you think the ones I picked are beautiful? Such beautiful materials were all sent by Ru and great elder princess. Many of them should be tributes. Even if one had money, one couldn't buy them. Why did Qin Wanru pick all of them? Compared to her, she was the elder sister. Moreover, her current identity was not ordinary. Of course, she could choose the ones in her grandmother's hands. Di Yen frowned. Although he was a jerk, he could see clearly in this matter. He walked to Qin Yuru and reminded her in a low voice. Great elder princess sent these gifts to thank cousin Wan. However, Qin Yuru didn't listen to him at all. She looked up at Madame Dowager and seemed to listen to her. You, let Zhuozhuo choose first. This is the gratitude of Ru and great elder princess. Madame Dowager's face darkened and she said lightly. Qin Yuru's face changed. She glared at Qin Wanru angrily and pushed the few pieces of materials in her hand out fiercely. She retreated angrily. Because she pushed too hard, 2 pieces of materials fell to the ground and made a heavy sound. Everyone's eyes fell on the materials involuntarily and then turned to Qin Yuru's face. Oh, I hit them too hard. It's really careless. Qin Yuru put a fake smile on her face and patted her sleeves. She couldn't hide the jealousy and hatred in her eyes. Qin Wanru walked over to pick up the 2 pieces of materials on the ground and put them on the table. Then she pulled out a few pieces of materials and turned to Madame Dowager with a smile. Grandma, I want these pieces. Chapter 214. The pieces of cloth that Qin Wanru chose were the ones that she had picked out just now. Qin Yuru was so angry that she almost jumped up. She moved her feet and was about to step forward, but was stopped by Di Yen. Don't you want to pick a few more pieces? They were originally given to you by Ru and great elder princess. It doesn't matter even if you take all of them. Madame Dowager said gently. Just these pieces. The rest are all grandma's. Qin Wanru said generously. Yujie came over and moved these pieces to the table on the other side. At this time, there were still about half of them left on the table. Yuru, grandma is old, and I don't need such gorgeous materials. Come over and pick 2 pieces. Besides, pick 2 pieces for your mother. Zhuozhuo will also pick 2 pieces for your mother later. Madame Dowager said kindly. Qin Wanru had so many pieces, but she only had 2. Qin Yuru was so angry that her face turned pale. She was the daughter of the legal wife of this mansion and the biological daughter of her father. How could an outsider bitch dare to take her place and step on her head? Grandma, since these are all found by my second sister, I don't need them. Qin Yuru couldn't control her sarcasm and said. Yuru, these were originally given by Ru and great elder princess to thank your sister. It's normal for your second sister to take more. If you think it's not enough, just pick 4 pieces. Madame Dowager said with a headache. She just wanted to make peace. Qin Yuru had caused a lot of trouble. Madame Dowager just wanted her to stop for a while in case she caused more trouble. Although Di Yan and her had been engaged, Di Yan was a little happy to see her like this. Even if he had to marry Qin Yuru in the end, he was afraid that they would not be happy together. Although Madame Dowager was old, she had experienced a lot of things. She knew that Di Yan entered the inner court and followed Qin Yuru everywhere. It was obvious that he was forced. Old Madame of Duke Yong and Duke Yong had a lot of power. If Qin Yuru didn't behave well, she would make Di Yan hate her. At that time, she would suffer. Thank you, grandmother. I won't stand on ceremony then. Qin Yuru said coldly. With the brocade that Qin Wanru had picked out, she would not like whatever old grandma did or said. She squinted at old grandma, took a few steps forward, walked to the table, and started to pick out the brocade. She even pushed the unselected material to the side. Qin Wanru was standing there, and those pieces of material hit her heavily. If Yu Jie hadn't pulled her quickly, Qin Wanru would have bumped into those pieces of material. Second sister, I'm so sorry. I was too excited when I heard that I could pick a few more pieces, so I used too much force. Qin Yuru still pretended to be so fake that it made people's teeth hurt. Qin Wanru calmly stepped back again and again, ignoring her. Qin Yuru felt as if she had punched a piece of cotton. She became more and more displeased. She randomly picked 4 pieces of cloth and helped Madame D take 2 pieces before leaving. Old grandma looked at the 2 pieces of cloth left on the table and sighed silently. Now she could only wrong Shui Rulin and give her these 2 pieces. Come on, send these 2 pieces of cloth to Madame Shui. Old grandma ordered. Yes. Nanny Duan answered and went to clean up. Grandmother, I have a lot of cloth here. I can send 4 pieces to my mother. These 2 pieces of cloth are actually quite suitable for you. Qin Wanru reached out to stop her. She walked to another table, picked a few pieces of cloth and asked Yu Jie to bring it over. How can you do that? You only have 6 pieces in total. If you give Rulin 4, you will only have 2 left. Old grandma reached out to stop her. Grandmother, 2 pieces are enough for me. I can't wear more pieces in a short time anyway. Qin Wanru raised her clothes coquettishly. Because of her fast growth, the slightly long sleeves that were made before were now just right. Old grandma had said that the clothes did not fit her before. Seeing her sleeves, Madame Dowager couldn't help laughing. Her kind eyes fell on Qin Wanru, and she didn't refuse anymore. She nodded and said, Then give your mother 4 pieces first. I'll make them for you later. She grew fast during this period, but it would not be so fast after a while. At that time, she could find the cloth to make for Zhuozhua. Grandmother, why does Madame Shui have 4 pieces of cloth, but my mother only has 2? Qin Yuru was unhappy again and raised her eyes. The smile on old grandma's face faded and her eyes fell on the servant girl behind Qin Yuru. There were also 6 pieces of cloth, 4 of which belonged to Qin Yuru and 2 of which belonged to Madame D. Although Qin Wanru had chosen first, the total number of cloth was the same as Qin Yuru's. But even so, Qin Yuru was still not satisfied. She frowned and really did not like Qin Yuru, who was as greedy as Madame D. Cousin Yu. Di Yan reminded Qin Yuru in a low voice again. Even he could see it clearly, but Qin Yuru did it so obviously. In fact, even if Qin Wanru didn't give them anything, it didn't matter. Originally, it was Ru and Great Elder Princess's gratitude, but Qin Yuru still refused to rest after taking a lot. Big sister, these are originally my cloth. I want to show filial piety to my mother. What's wrong with this? Qin Wanru looked at Qin Yuru naturally and said with cold eyes. Madame Shui is your elder, and my mother is also your elder. My mother has raised you for so many years. How can you favor one and discriminate against the other? Qin Yuru rolled her eyes and said. Her words sounded very reasonable. If it were not for the situation of Qin's mansion, Qin Wanru's current approach was indeed a little wrong. Since Madame D was the legal wife, naturally, She should not be less than Shui Rulin. But the situation of Qin's mansion was completely different from that of other mansions. Big sister, if my father thinks that I should give Madame D cloth, I will give all these to Madame D. Qin Wanru looked at Qin Yuru leisurely and said something that made Qin Yuru's face flush with anger. Qin Yuru's face not only turned red, but also turned green and white. Madame D's power in the Qin's mansion was now gone because of Qin Wanru. Moreover, because of what happened when Madame D asked Qin Wanru to take care of the sick, Qin Huayong ordered Madame D to draw a line with Qin Wanru so that Qin Wanru could ignore Madame D. This is actually another way of proving Madame D was wrong. Second sister, please be careful with your words. At least mother has brought you up. Qin Yuru said through gritted teeth. Big sister, thank you for your correction. Please tell Madame D. Qin Wanru said with little effort. Qin Yuru was so angry that she couldn't say a word. Others might not know what Madame D had done, but she knew it clearly. Qin Wanru meant that she couldn't see what Madame D had done for her, which also meant that she knew everything that Madame D wanted to deal with her. Grandma, we are leaving. Gritting her teeth, Qin Yuru glanced at Qin Wanru viciously and said goodbye to old grandma. All right. The old madam sighed and agreed. Even if she wanted to protect Qin Huayong, the only bloodline, it seemed that Qin Yuru would not appreciate it. Madame D had not only harmed her, but also raised her daughter to be like this. Old grandma felt very uncomfortable. Qin Yuru turned around and walked out with hatred. She didn't want to stay here for a moment. As long as she saw Qin Yuru's face, she wanted to scratch that delicate face. Di Yen bowed to old grandma and hurriedly chased after her. At the gate of the courtyard, Di Yen caught up with Qin Yuru. Cousin Yu, how can you do this? This is old grandma's place. Although Di Yen had no sense of propriety when it came to women, he was also a son of an aristocratic family who grew up with rules. When he saw Qin Yuru's behavior just now, he felt that there was something wrong. Cousin, what do you mean? Do you really like that bitch? Why are you speaking up for her? She has bullied me and my mother to such an extent. Qin Yuru suddenly exploded and shouted loudly. Looking at the frightened servant girls and old maids around, Di Yen felt very embarrassed. He looked around and pulled Qin Yuru to the gate of the courtyard. Cousin, did I hit the nail on the head? Cousin Yu and Cousin Yu, both of them are good. Before, I only saw that Cousin Yu was very good. Now I see that this little girl has grown up. It's not bad to be a loving cousin. Qin Yuru wanted to shake off Di Yan's hand and said sternly. How could the previous matter be easily forgotten? Ning Zaixian's matter had always been on her mind. Sometimes, she almost couldn't control herself and wanted to rush to Ning's mansion to give Ning Kaixian a few hard slaps. But her maternal grandmother and mother actually told her that it was not a big deal. They said that Di Yan was still young and this matter could be forgotten. In Di Yan's opinion, he would thank her for her magnanimity. In Qin Yuru's opinion, Ning Zaixian's matter had already passed. It was impossible for Duke Yong's mansion to marry Ning's mansion. Qin Yuru agreed on the surface, but in fact she had never really let go of the knot in her heart. Now, being provoked by Qin Wanru and Di Yan's repeated pulling, she directly vented her anger on Di Yan. Cousin Yu, what do you mean? Di Yan's face turned pale with anger. He didn't want to mention this matter at all and even thought that it would be better not to mention it in the future. Before, Duke Yong had already told him about the various disadvantages of this matter. Ning Zaixian's reputation had been ruined and it was impossible for her to become his legal wife. Besides, marrying her would do him no good at all. Even though he still had some affection for Ning Kaixian, it was not enough for him to put everything aside and be with Ning Kaixian. If Qin Yuru hadn't mentioned it before, Di Yan would have thought that although Qin Yuru didn't do well in some aspects, at least she was very generous and gentle to him. But now Qin Yuru couldn't help saying this. He found that Qin Yuru had always kept it in her heart or was waiting for the right opportunity to get even with him. For a moment he was annoyed. Seeing Di Yan's face, Qin Yuru immediately came to her senses. Her face turned pale and she panicked. Di Yan snorted coldly, turned around and strode away. Cousin. Qin Yuru was anxious and hurriedly chased after him. Unfortunately, Di Yen left resolutely and didn't mean to wait for her. After running for a few roads, she could only see his back. Qin Yuru was so anxious that her eyes turned red. She panted and stamped her feet hard. She turned around viciously. She was not done with Qin Wanru. Chapter 215. Qin Wanru went to Shui Ruolin's yard. After coming out of Madame Dowager's yard, she went to Shui Ruolin's yard. Shui Ruolin was getting more and more pregnant. Even if she dealt with affairs, she often dealt with them in her yard. Madame Dowager had exempted her from morning and evening meditation, but she still went to see Madame Dowager from time to time. Originally, she was raised by Madame Dowager, so her relationship with Madame Dowager was naturally better than that of others. When Qin Wanru came over, she was leaning against the window and looking at the account book. Hearing Qin Wanru's voice, she raised her head with a smile and was about to sit up. Qin Wanru hurriedly stepped forward to stop her. "Mother, I'm not an outsider. You can lean against the window. How about going to the great elder princess's mansion today?" Shui Ruolin did not refuse. She pushed the account book aside and asked with a smile. "Not bad. The great elder princess's master is very good." Qin Wanru asked Yu Jie to put a few pieces of cloth on the table. "These are all sent by Ru and great elder princess. Mother, pick 4 pieces of cloth." Hearing that Qin Wanru asked for Ru and great elder princess's reward, Shui Ruolin's smile turned into joy. Everyone in the capital city knew what it meant to be rewarded by Ru and great elder princess in the capital city. She gently patted her hand and said, "I am like this now. I don't need to wear new clothes. You can take all of them." They were originally rewarded by Ru and great elder princess. With the identity of Ru and great elder princess, she would certainly not reward Qin's mansion for no reason. It was for the sake of Qin Wanru. Shui Ruolin was originally a sensible person. She could clearly see the meaning of Ru and great elder princess, so she was naturally unwilling to pick the things that originally belonged to Qin Wanru. "Mother, even if I make clothes now, I will soon not be able to wear them. They are not suitable for me to make clothes." Qin Wanru raised her sleeves and said. The sleeves, which were neither too long nor too short, had grown out a while ago. When Shui Ruolin made clothes for Qin Wanru, she originally wanted to make them just right. Qin Wanru specially asked the old maid in the sewing room to make them a little longer. Now the clothes were just right for her to wear. Looking at her sleeves that were neither too long nor too short, Shui Ruolin immediately thought of this matter and could not help but laugh. "Even so, you still have to make clothes. You're growing faster now, but you won't be able to grow so fast after a while. I'd better make it for my mother first. My mother can't wear the previous clothes, so I have to make a few more sets of clothes. Anyway, I have clothes, so I'm not in a hurry to wear them. The previous sets of clothes are specially made a size bigger, so they are almost the same," Qin Wanru said. "Well, leave it with me." "Have you sent it to Yuru?" Seeing that she repeatedly wanted to give the cloth to her, Shui Ruolin no longer refused. She thought that she could keep the cloth and ask someone to measure Qin Wanru's size when making clothes in the future. As for Qin Yuru, she was at least the first miss of Ningyuan Army General's mansion, so she had to treat Shui Ruolin fairly on the surface. Shui Ruolin's attitude towards Madame D and Qin Yuru was different. She could ignore Madame D, but she had to take care of Qin Yuru. After all, Qin Yuru was the only descendant of Qin Huayong. Big sister has already picked one, and Grandma made the decision to let Madame D pick 2. But Big sister was very angry when she left, saying that Madame D only had 2, but Mother had 4. Qin Wanru blinked her eyes and said, "Yuru even wants to fight for this kind of thing now?" Shui Ruolin said in surprise. She also watched Qin Yuru grow up, and thought that Qin Yuru was very generous before. But since Qin Yuru's reputation in Jiangzhou was ruined, she seemed to have changed into a different person. She was not only mean but also vicious, almost the same as Madame D. Now she could be regarded as the future young madam of Duke Yong's mansion, but she was still so narrow-minded, which really made people feel speechless. Of course she will be angry. She wanted to choose first before, but then Grandma let me choose first, and I took away all the pieces of cloth she chose first. Qin Wanru smiled slightly and said slyly as if pointing out something. So, she's angry and wants to argue with you? Shui Rulin frowned and softly warned her, Wanru, be careful. Yuru will not suffer for nothing. Mother, don't worry, I know. Qin Wanru smiled and slightly raised the corner of her mouth. Her original intention was to irritate Qin Yuru. With Qin Yuru's temperament, she would definitely vent her anger on Diyin. Although she knew that Qin Wanru was not as weak as she looked, Shui Rulin was still worried. After specially warning her for a few more words, Qin Wanru agreed and left one by one. Shui Rulin also asked the servant girl to bring some pastries to Qin Wanru. Recently, she didn't eat much. Her servants tried their best to make some pastries that looked, smelled, and tasted good for her. Originally, she wanted to send some to Qin Wanru. Coincidentally, Shui Rulin came over, so she asked Qin Wanru to bring some pastries to Qin Wanru. In the past few days, whenever she made something delicious, Shui Rulin would leave some for Qin Wanru. The servant girl followed Qin Wanru and Yu Jie to Jifeng Pavilion. On the way, she suddenly met Qin Yuru's servant girl, Min. Seeing Qin Wanru coming over, Mien, who was holding a soup cup, stood on the side of the road and bowed to Qin Wanru respectfully. This servant greets second miss. Qin Wanru glanced at the soup cup in her hand and nodded slightly. Yu Jie walked past her with 2 pieces of cloth in her hand and curiously glanced at Min. When the last servant girl walked past Mien, Mien was about to turn around and leave. As a principal servant girl, she certainly didn't need to give way to an ordinary servant girl. Unexpectedly, there was a sudden change. Mien didn't know what she stepped on, but she slipped and fell on the servant girl. The servant girl subconsciously stepped back and wanted to avoid Mien's body. Unexpectedly, Mien wanted to stabilize her body and reached out to grab the servant girl's hand, and the soup cup in her hand was poured directly on the servant girl. The soup in the cup was still very hot, and it was poured on the servant girl. The servant girl screamed in pain and threw away the things in her hand. She reached forward and grabbed Yu Jie's hand. Yu Jie reacted quickly. When the servant girl grabbed her hand, she swung it hard. The servant girl staggered and fell heavily on the ground, and the pastries in her hand were all thrown on the ground. Mei Yan beside her was also embarrassed. Some of the soup was also spilled on her, and a few pieces of pastries were smashed on her head. Qin Wanru stood still and looked back. She looked at the 2 people who fell on the ground indifferently with an unclear look in her eyes. Yu Jie walked over and stood in front of her with a vigilant look. What a coincidence! Mei-en, what's wrong with you? Yu Jie said with an unkind look. I'm sorry, second Mississippi. I slipped and hit someone. It's all my fault. Please forgive me, second miss. Mei-en sat up in a panic. Regardless of her embarrassment, she hurriedly knelt to Qin Wanru and begged for mercy. Qin Wanru frowned and looked at Mei-en. She waved her hand and turned around to leave. Mei-en seemed to want to make up for something. Looking at the pastries overturned on the ground, her eyes lit up and she said, Second miss, the kitchen has also made the pastries. I'll go and get some for you now. The kitchen also has pastries? Qin Wanru's eyes fell on the exquisite pastries on the ground. They were made by Shui Rulin in the small kitchen. Yes, there are. Madame saw that Madame Shui liked them, so she asked the kitchen to make more. There are also a lot of pastries in the kitchen, Mei Yan said. No need. Qin Wanru shook her head and turned to leave. Thank you, second miss. Thank you, second miss. Seeing that Qin Wanru didn't intend to pursue it, Mei Yan was overjoyed and kowtowed to Qin Wanru twice. Seeing Qin Wanru leave, she pulled the servant girl's hand and got up. She wore thick winter clothes and didn't burn her face. Although the servant girl was uncomfortable, she didn't dare to really target Mei Yan and had to pull her up. You are Madame Shui's servant, right? Go and change your clothes first. Then go to the kitchen and get some other pastries for second Mississippi. Min wiped the crumbs on her face with a handkerchief and said. The servant girl didn't dare to refuse. She immediately picked up the crumbs on the ground and turned to leave. It would be the best if she could get another one for second Mississippi, otherwise, she would delay Madame Shui's matter. After the servant girl changed her clothes, washed up, and stood in the big kitchen. There was a pastry prepared. It was similar to the one Shui Rulin used before, but there were several kinds of pastries that were more exquisite than those Shui Rulin used, and the flower-shaped ones were more beautiful. The servant girl had never seen such a beautiful style, so she couldn't help asking a few more questions. Knowing that it was made with a set of new models in the big kitchen, she couldn't help but want to please Madame Shui. Originally, Madame Shui didn't use many pastries now. If she could get the set of models in the big kitchen, Madame Shui would definitely use more. After inquiring about it, the servant girl first sent a pastry to Qin Wanru. Then she returned to the kitchen and asked the people in the big kitchen to get another one. She wanted to show the old maids who made pastries in the small kitchen. If they thought it was good, she could go to the big kitchen to get the model and make it herself. The pastries that Shui Rulin made now basically didn't use the ingredients in the big kitchen. When the servant girl sent the pastry over, Qin Wanru asked Yu Jie to take it, and then sent the servant girl back to report to Shui Rulin. The pastry did look good. Not only did it look good, but the plate was also exquisite. The aroma made people want to eat it. With such a rich fragrance, not to mention attracting people, even other things would be attracted to it. Thinking of this, her watery eyes became more and more deep. She looked down and heard that Madame D brought a cat from Duke Yong's mansion and raised it in the mansion recently. This plate looked a little familiar, but she couldn't see it clearly because it was covered by the pastry. After looking at it carefully, Qin Wanru reached out, but was stopped by Yu Jie. "Miss, this is the pastry sent from the big kitchen. I want to see this plate." Qin Wanru smiled slightly, reached out to push Yu Jie's hand away, took away the pastry on the side, and stacked it, revealing one side of the plate below. The exquisitely painted plate made people's eyes light up. The peonies were in full bloom, accompanied by green leaves, and butterflies fluttered among the flowers. She stretched out her hand and touched the patterns printed on it. Suddenly, a trace of deep hostility flashed in her eyes. She had seen this set of exquisite pastry plates before and had a deep memory of it. Chapter 216. In her previous life, this plate, or rather, this set of plates, had appeared in Madame Dowager's place. When Madame of Duke Xing came to the mansion that day, when Madame Dowager received her, she used this set of plates with pastries and fruits. How did Madame of Duke Xing scold Madame Dowager? She would never be able to forget how the old mistress, whom she had always relied on, had knelt on the ground and begged for forgiveness despite her serious illness. That scene had dazzled her eyes. At that time, although she had knelt beside the old mistress, she could not help but want to argue. However, her grandmother's cold hand had held her tightly. After Madame of Duke Xing left, Madame Dowager calmly told herself to wrap up this set of plates, send them to Madame D's room, and return them to Madame of Duke Xing, because she heard that this set of plates was originally Madame of Duke Xing's dowry and was a royal gift. The old mistress was panting and her face was as pale as snow. It was as if it had happened just yesterday. Her grandmother's health was deteriorating day by day. There was no doubt that Madame D's plot was involved, but it should also be related to this matter. Grandma, who had always been kind and gentle, had to humiliatingly kneel to Madame of Duke Xing and beg for mercy for the safety of the whole mansion. Unexpectedly, Madame of Duke Xing's belongings had appeared in Qin's mansion so early in this life. As expected, Madame of Duke Xing had intervened in this matter. However, in the last life, Madame of Duke Xing intervened in this matter through Madame D. Now it seemed that the relationship between Madame D and her was not as harmonious as in the last life. This also reminded Qin Wanru that Madame D and Madame of Duke Xing should have known each other for a long time, not after they moved to the capital city as she had thought before. A trace of coldness flashed through her deep watery eyes, but the smile on her face became brighter. It seemed that Madame D wanted to use this plate to plot against her this time. "That's good, I can help him with his plan. Go ask the kitchen. I like this plate. Is there anything else? If you don't have one, bring me a similar one." Qin Wanru said that there should be no other plates, but she was afraid that there would be other plates flowing out. Qin Wanru felt that she had to be careful. "Miss, I'll go right away." Qin Yu chimed in. Qin Wanru nodded and Qin Yu left in a hurry. Yujie, ask Nanny Zheng to come here, Qin Wanru ordered after looking at the plate carefully. Nanny Zheng was now Qin Wanru's servant. She taught Qin Wanru the etiquette and helped Nanny Yu to tidy up Jifeng Pavilion. She was not always with Qin Wanru. Yujie answered and left. After a while, she invited Nanny Zheng over. Qin Wanru had asked the servant girl to replace the previous plate. Nanny Zheng, have a look. Do you recognize this plate? After Nanny Zheng entered the room, Qin Wanru pointed at the plate on the table and said. Nanny Zheng walked over, took it over, looked at it against the sunlight in the window, and said with certainty, Miss, this is for the royal use. There's even a secret mark of the palace on it, so it should be a reward from the palace. When did the general's estate receive such a reward? No reward. Qin Wanru shook her head. How could there be such a thing if there's no reward? Nanny Zheng's face changed dramatically. It was impossible for the royal gift to suddenly fall from the sky. If one was not careful, it could even bring a disaster to the whole family. I don't know where it came from. The kitchen sent this plate here. I just asked Qin Yu to find it and see if there are other plates. Qin Wanru stood up, walked to the window, looked at the sunlight outside, narrowed her eyes and said, But why did it appear in Qin's mansion? Nanny Zheng had been in the palace for a long time. Of course, she knew that this kind of thing could not be given away casually. Every royal gift was worshipped as a family heirloom. How could it be scattered outside like this? It may have something to do with Madam, Qin Wanru said. Madam is also from an aristocratic family. Doesn't she know that it will be a big deal? Nanny Zheng's face darkened. If something really happens, Madam can't bear it alone. Or she is not very clear. Of course, it is also possible that someone gave her a guarantee. Qin Wanru said coldly. In the last life, Madam of Duke Xing and Madam D used this to control her grandmother and forced her to kneel down. Or there were some deals that she did not know about. Later, this matter was not publicized, so no one knew there was such a thing. In the last life, she had always wondered why her grandmother was so secretive about her family background. Did it have something to do with this matter? For this kind of thing, not only the one who uses the royal gift will be guilty, but also the one who loses it will be guilty. Nanny Zheng heard some other meaning from Qin Wanru's words. After thinking for a while, she reminded Qin Wanru. Even the one who loses it will be responsible? Qin Wanru turned around and said slowly. Since the royal gift, any mansion should attach great importance to it. If it is really lost, of course, it will be a big crime. Nanny Zheng was very clear about this kind of thing. After thinking for a while, she said with certainty. Therefore, at that time, her grandmother's so-called apology was only used to suppress her grandmother. It was not only her grandmother but also Madam of Duke Xing herself who was guilty. It was just that Madam of Duke Xing bullied her grandmother and put all the blame on her, so that her grandmother was forced to kneel down and ask for forgiveness. There was coldness in her eyes, but the smile on her face became more and more gorgeous. Her white and tender fingers gently tapped on the table for a few times, and then she raised her head and asked Nanny Zheng, If the plate is broken, what will be the crime? A light punishment will be flogged, and a heavy punishment will be death. Nanny Zheng said with a stern face. This plate looks like it is going to break, right? Qin Wanru's eyes fell on the plate calmly. The very small lines were hidden behind the exquisite patterns. If one did not look carefully, he would not be able to see them. It did not seem to be newly broken. She raised the corners of her mouth and showed a sweet smile. It was very elegant, but inexplicably made people feel a chill in their hearts. Mother, what's the use of asking man to send that plate to Qin Wanru? She deliberately snatched the material I picked and did not treat you as an elder. She deliberately made cousin and I unhappy and let cousin scold me. Mother, I want that bitch to die. Sitting in Madame D's room, Qin Yuru looked at Mian who came back to report and said impatiently. At this time, Madame D looked very calm. She waved her hand, and other people in the room left, except for Nanny Zhou. Let Nanny Zhou tell you. Madame D said. First miss, don't worry. This is a gift from the emperor. Not everyone can use it. Now a plate is sent to Second Mississippi. If one of them is broken, Second Miss can't pay for it even if she gives up her life. Seeing that there was no one else in the room, Nanny Zhou said proudly, "What, a royal gift?" Although Qin Yuru had never seen it before, she had heard of the meaning of the imperial gift. She immediately stood up from the chair in shock, and her face turned pale. "Mother, if something happens, will we be implicated?" "Don't worry, this is given by your aunt. Nothing will happen. As long as we don't say anything, no one will know. It's okay." Madame D comforted Qin Yuru with a smile. When she first heard it, she was also shocked. Fortunately, after Countess Yong explained, she was relieved. "Moreover, this is a betrothal gift from your aunt. It is not a private gift. When you get married, you will still bring it to Duke Yong's mansion. It can be considered as a justifiable move. That is given to me by my aunt? Then why did she give it to that bitch Qin Yuru? Does her dirty hands deserve to touch such a respectable thing?" Hearing the origin of the plate, Qin Yuru breathed a sigh of relief. After sitting down again, she said unhappily, "I just lent it to her temporarily, not really," Madame D said with a smile. Since that day when she came back from Duke Yong's mansion, her depressed mood had improved a lot. Her mother and sister-in-law both agreed to this marriage, and sister-in-law, who originally did not agree with this marriage, helped her come up with such an idea. However, she just came back at that time and did not take any action for the time being. Today was a good time. What if it breaks? Qin Yuru was still worried. In her heart, this set of exquisite plate was hers. It will be better if it breaks. If it breaks the royal gift, she will pay with her life. Madame D sneered and said viciously. This was one of her original purposes. But will it be okay for us if it breaks? Qin Yuru did not understand these things, but she had some doubts in her heart. She stared at Madame D and asked, "It doesn't matter. We came from a good place. This set of plate was placed in your room before. It was Qin Wanru who liked this set of plate. You told her that this was a royal gift and she could not borrow it randomly, but she just said that she would borrow it for a day and come back the next day. If it breaks, who can blame? If something happens, if she doesn't pay with her life, who else will pay for it?" Madame D said proudly. She also felt that what her sister-in-law said before was reasonable. What she did before was a little too hasty. Otherwise, things would not have come to this point. If she had gotten her sister-in-law's advice earlier, she would not have fallen into this situation. Except for Qin Wanru and Shui Ruolin, if the old woman was disobedient, she could kill her. She still had a sachet made from the powder of Qingxiu grass. Of course, she took it with her when she came to the capital this time. It was just that the old woman had been guarding her strictly recently, and she was sick, so she couldn't go to the old woman's place. So, the old woman could live in peace for a few days. After the two young ones were dealt with, she could deal with the old woman easily. Then how to make her break the plate? Qin Yuru was very tempted, so she rolled her eyes and said hurriedly, "Did she get a few pieces of cloth from R and Great Elder Princess?" Madame D said with a gloomy smile. "Yes, several pieces. She said she would give 4 pieces to Shui Ruolin. I think they are all her own. She just said it in a nice way. She really thinks that I can't see it." Qin Yuru said with hatred. She was so angry that she came to discuss with Madame D to deal with Qin Wanru. She had not settled her own affairs before, so she did not have much energy to deal with Qin Wanru. Now her marriage was settled and she got what she wanted. Naturally, she would not let Qin Wanru go. Chapter 217. The brocade was still on the table, and the pastries were still on the table. The cat jumped in from nowhere and jumped on the table. When Qin Wanru's 2 maids rushed over, the things on the table had been messed up. The pastry crumbs were stuck to the brocade, and the brocade was scratched with a few holes. It could be said that the room was in a mess. The cat jumped a few times briskly, and actually jumped to the window while the people were pouncing on it. It picked up its paw and licked it. "Quick, catch it, it broke Mrs. Brocade." "I can't catch it. It jumps too fast." "It broke the plate. What should we do?" "It's okay. The plate is not a big deal. But the brocade is in trouble." The brocade has been sent to our mansion. Even if it's broken, it should be okay. The rough maids and old maids outside the room heard the sound of several senior maids in the room while panting and discussing. They all looked at each other. Did something happen? At the gate of the courtyard, Qin Yuru walked slowly with a group of people. When she arrived in the courtyard, she saw a group of dumbfounded servants and heard such a big noise in Qin Wanru's room. She could not help but look serious and asked unhappily, "What's going on? What's the noise?" "First miss, there is a cat in second miss's room. It broke the brocade and the plate," an old maid hurriedly reported. "Brocade? The brocade given by Ru and great elder princess?" Qin Yuru's face changed when she heard it. "I don't know." The old maid was shocked and hurriedly said, "Plate what plate?" Di Fenglan followed behind Qin Yuru and asked coldly at this time, "Cousin, is it the plate that my mother sent to you as a betrothal gift? That is a royal gift." What? Qin Yuru's face turned pale. Her body shook and she almost fell. No way. "Cousin Yu, I can't be real, can I?" Di Fenglan was anxious and strode forward, facing Qin Wanru who came out of the room. "Qin Wanru, why did you take my cousin's stuff? It's a royal gift. You not only took it but also broke it. You should pay with your life." Di Fenglan said furiously. "Miss Di?" Qin Wanru looked at Di Fenglan, who was gnashing her teeth in anger, and her eyes fell on her face with some hesitation, as if she really couldn't recognize who she was. "Second sister, did you really break things? My plate and the brocade sent by Ru and great elder princess?" Qin Yuru hurried over at this time, looking flustered. Beside her was another miss whom Qin Wanru had never seen before. She was beautiful and outstanding. She frowned and looked at Qin Wanru unkindly. At first glance, Qin Wanru knew that she was not a nice person. "Big sister, do you know this cat?" Qin Wanru smiled slightly, ignored her question and pointed at it. He pointed at the cat that was still sitting by the window. "I don't know what kind of cat this is, and I don't know where this stray cat comes from. It's you who broke it. It's your fault. I'm going to tell my father now. I can't make a decision on this matter," Qin Yuru said and turned to leave. "Big sister, don't you want to know where this cat comes from?" Qin Wanru asked calmly. "Qin Wanru, you still have time to ask where this cat comes from when you are in such a situation? Don't tell me you want to push the blame to a cat. What does a cat know?" Di Fenglan scolded harshly. She suffered a loss in Qin Wanru's place that day, and had been locked up in the mansion for a period of time. She finally had such a chance to come out, and Qin Wanru was in trouble. Of course, she would not let her go. "Big sister, I heard from my mother that Madame D has recently raised a cat. I don't know if it is this cat," Qin Wanru said with a smile. "Even if it is a cat raised by my mother, do you really want to blame this thing on a cat?" Qin Yuru's face changed slightly, and she said angrily. Even she did not notice this thing about this cat. Unexpectedly, Qin Wanru noticed it. "Is this cat the one raised by Madame D?" Qin Wanru said with a smile. "How do I know? Come and ask my father to come here. Tell him that second miss borrowed a plate from me. Now she not only broke the plate, but also tore the brocade given by Ru and great elder princess." After calming down, Qin Yuru turned to order the old maid who followed her. Even if Qin Wanru knew this cat was raised by her mother, so what? Could she blame this thing on her mother? The old maid took the order and hurried to Qin Wanru's study. "I borrowed a plate from big sister?" Qin Wanru blinked her eyes, grasped the key point in Qin Yuru's words, and asked. "Qin Wanru, if you didn't borrow a plate from my cousin, how could her plate be in your hands and broken by you?" Di Fenglan sneered and strode to Qin Wanru's room. Qin Yuru and another miss snorted at her and also rushed into the room. The mess in the room had not been cleaned up. There were broken plates and cakes on the ground, 2 pieces of brocade that were torn, and several pieces of porcelain. Yu Jie and Qiu Yu were cleaning up in a panic, but when Di Fenglan rushed in, they had not finished cleaning up. Seeing people coming in, both of them were stunned. Seeing so many people rushing in, the cat at the window was so scared that it jumped to the ground, and then stretched its waist directly to the top of the opposite wall. After a while, people could not be seen. Seeing that the cat was scared away, Qin Yuru's eyes showed a trace of complacency. There were many similar cats in the world. Even if Qin Wanru must point out that it was her mother's cat, she must have evidence. Well, Qin Wanru, you still say that you didn't break things. Look at this plate, it is obviously the plate given by our mansion. Di Fenglan pointed at the fragments on the ground and said loudly. In fact, she had seen that set of plates once or twice, and the fragments in front of her looked like it. First Miss Qin, your mansion's second miss is really audacious. How dare she do this kind of thing? Any kind of imperial object is recorded. Whoever breaks it will have to bear a big responsibility. Another miss who followed them shook her head and looked at Qin Wanru with contempt. Second sister, you? How dare you? Qin Yuru looked panicked and reached out to point at Qin Wanru, as if she was too shocked to say a complete sentence. Qin Wanru looked at these people who were acting enthusiastically without changing her expression. She slightly raised the corner of her mouth and walked over. She calmly ordered the two servant girls who were still cleaning up, Yuji, Qingwei, clean up the things. Since they are broken, just throw them away. Hurry up and serve tea to these ladies. Yes, miss, we will be ready soon. The two stunned servant girls hurried to speed up, as if they were going to clean up the evidence. Qin Wanru, don't move. Do you really think you can hide such a big thing? Di Fenglan was so angry that she laughed and sneered. Hide what? Qin Wanru said lightly, it was nothing big, but Big Sister and Miss Di brought people here aggressively, as if they knew something must have happened here. I want to ask why Miss D and Big Sister come here at this time? You are so presumptuous. Seeing Qin Wanru being so disrespectful, Di Fenglan raised her eyebrows and said, kneel down and ask for forgiveness. How dare you? Miss D, I really don't understand what you are talking about. Why should I kneel down and ask for forgiveness? And what does Big Sister's plate mean? What did I do with that plate? Qin Wanru looked at Di Fenglan calmly, and then slowly turned to Qin Yuru, and sneered, Big Sister, you are not deliberately trying to plot against me, are you? Qin Wanru, don't go too far. Di Fenglan was so angry that she was about to tremble. She had always looked down on Qin Yuru, not to mention Qin Wanru. She never expected that one day she would be ridiculed by Qin Wanru. I went too far, Miss D. You and Big Sister plot against me. Do you mean to destroy the Imperial object? In this case, kneel down and ask for forgiveness. Qin Wanru suddenly stopped smiling and said coldly. She took a step forward and stared straight at Di Fenglan. You bitch. Di Fenglan did not expect that at this time, Qin Wanru would use her own words to fight back so fiercely, and she was so shocked that she took a step back. Di Fenglan immediately screamed and reached out to slap Qin Wanru's face. Yujia had already been prepared. She took Qin Wanru a step back and happened to avoid Di Fenglan's hand. Second sister, apologize to cousin. Qin Yuru said with a pale face. Apologize? Big Sister came here so aggressively with so many people. Isn't it because you want to get hold of my weakness? It's strange. How could Big Sister have the foresight to know that something happened here? I haven't cleaned up yet, but you brought such a large group of people to block me. Miss D, keep saying that I have committed a big crime, and Big Sister means that I borrowed a plate from you. How can I have such a big face to borrow the Imperial object from Big Sister? Qin Wanru sneered and stared at Qin Yuru with a pair of bright watery eyes that seemed to be burning with raging flames. Second Miss Qin, you are really unruly as rumored. But in the current situation, you can't just be unruly. Seeing that Qin Yuru was so angry and annoyed that she couldn't even say a word, the miss who came with them hurriedly stepped forward to help her out. She sneered and looked at Qin Wanru, curling her lips and said, I haven't been in the capital for a long time, and I haven't met anyone. I also behave well in front of others. How come this miss has already heard the rumor? I don't know where the so-called rumor came from. Big Sister said it, or Miss D said it, or this miss likes this kind of gossip the most and eavesdropped it. Even if this miss didn't look for Qin Wanru at this time, Qin Wanru would look for her. Since she came with Qin Yuru and Di Fenglan, her purpose had been impure. She was fearless, of course, not afraid of what this miss said. Do. This miss was sharp-tongued, but her face turned blue and white after hearing Qin Wanru's words. She was so angry that she trembled. You really have no manners. How dare you speak like this? Do you think that our mansion has no manners? This miss who specializes in listening to rumors is really well educated. Qin Wanru retorted sarcastically. Second sister, you're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.